Good evening, Rockville. Today is July 29th, and we'll begin meeting number 18-24. Let us begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. I will start with Ms. Sarah Taylor Farrell. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
Madam Mayor and council members, we have no changes for this evening's agenda.
Okay. I will introduce one small one to allow our city manager to do a report. And welcome, Jeff Mihalik.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. We had a very nice welcome reception for him today, and it will be the first of many opportunities to meet with our new city manager. Thank you, Jeff.
Great. Mayor Ashton, members of City Council, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I do have a brief city manager's report this evening. Just quick that the Council of Governments did declare a regional drought watch, again a drought watch, not a drought warning, for our region, including the city of Rockville. That means that residences and businesses in our area are being asked to take voluntary measures to conserve water. The more we conserve now, the less we might have a challenge in the not too distant future. Again, just some ideas to conserve water include monitoring watering lawns, plants, and shrubs, sweeping sidewalks instead of using a hose, avoid washing your car if you can, fix plumbing issues and things of that nature. Again, the more we can do now to conserve water, the greater chance that we have of not declaring a drought warning in the future and then having mandatory restrictions. Just a few other things. Real proud of the Duck Derby that we had last week Friday. That's really big congratulations to the Rec and Parks team and also the Rockville Recreation and Parks Foundation Duck Derby. 5,000 ducks landed in the pool, if you will. It was a great big fundraiser. We had 300 participants. Council members Van Grack, Jackson, and Miles were all there to help us yank the ducks out of the water for the award winners. And the best news is that event raised $13,000. Again, $13,000, which will help towards renovations of the outdoor pool. So that's fantastic. Something for the future, National Night Out is coming. That'll be held on Tuesday, August 6th at various times, mainly in the evening. It's really a number of block parties that are hosted throughout city of Rockville. It really is an opportunity for neighbors to really discourage crime, prevent drug abuse, and actually get to know their neighbors a lot better, and that's a great way to prevent crime. So please watch for those opportunities and get out there, meet your neighbors, and talk about ways that we can make Rockville a safer community. And then lastly, we've been doing really well on piling up our grants in the city, particularly our Public Works Department. Pleased to tell you that the Public Works staff received notification that we received a $3.7 million grant that'll be used for water structure improvements in the Twin Brook area, which is fantastic. Also received a Maryland Smart Energy Community grant for another $250,000, and that'll be used for LED streetlights, fleet EV charging stations, LED light upgrades, and other solar technical assistance, and that is a way we can implement our climate action plan. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate the diverse sources of revenue for the city. I know that is something we'll need to continue to do, and budget season will be upon us very soon. Are there any questions on the city manager's report? Mr. Mihalik, congrats on your first report, first of many. All right. We'll now move to proclamations and recognitions. If my colleagues will please join me at the podium.
Good evening. I'm very honored to be presenting this proclamation along with Councilmember Fulton in recognition of the anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. This is an absolute pillar of civil rights in the United States for people with visible and invisible disabilities. and gave us the powerful phrase of nothing for us without us, which should be a powerful phrase for all it is. I would be remiss if I did not state that the ADA played an important role in my family's experiences with my father, who was a quadriplegic and often physically could not get into restaurants before 1992. And we had a mechanism for accessibility. Councilmember Fulton, did you want to say anything before we started?
Thank you for indulging me. 1 year ago next week, my family, the world, lost Fran Fulton, who was a dedicated and fierce warrior for the ADA, spent some time in the trenches with our own Kathleen Kleinman. I mention her today because of what she taught me about the ADA, which is that it's not about just full access to participate in society for people with disabilities. It's so that all of society can benefit from the full participation of everyone. One example is my mother-in-law sued the city of Philadelphia multiple times for curb cuts in the sidewalks. I can tell you how much I benefited from that when I tried to push my kids in strollers around the city of Philadelphia. So I am honored to be a part of this proclamation today, not just recognizing the legislation itself, but the people that fought for its passage and the people that fight today for it to reach its full promise.
Whereas individuals with disabilities have suffered mistreatment, discrimination, indignities, and humiliation for decades, and
whereas people with disabilities began to challenge societal barriers that excluded them from their communities, and when parents of children with disabilities began to fight against the exclusion and segregation of their children, and
whereas in the 1980s, the movement to establish laws that protect individuals and groups with disabilities from unfair treatment, provide equal access to employment, allow equal access, and provide special accommodations to public spaces, commercial facilities, and transportation was organized and codified. And
whereas the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed into law by President George H.W. Bush on July 26, 1990, during a White House ceremony, and whereas
the Americans with Disabilities Act prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in several areas, including employment, transportation, public accommodations, communications, and access to state and local government programs and services. And
whereas the city of Rockville takes an active role in making our community more accessible to people with disabilities by supporting and treating everyone with dignity and respect, and ensuring the rights of all residents to experience equality and freedom from discrimination.
Now, therefore, the Mayor and Council of the City of Rockville, Maryland, do hereby proclaim July 26, 2024, as the 34th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act being placed into law. Madam Mayor, I so move the proclamation.
Do we have a second? It has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand to say aye.
Aye. And to accept the proclamation is Kathleen Kleinman, Chair of the Transportation and Mobility Commission.
I am so moved by the fact that you're mentoring Fran Fulton. I marched and participated in protests with Fran for most of 30 years, and it was sorry to see her go. But as you said, the Americans with Disabilities Act is a civil rights law, and therefore it's also a human rights law. It sets standards for the nation. Other cities and other nations have followed. This new city council and this new mayor and the new administration can and should establish city code and enforcement in the areas of public accommodation and services. We need a vision and a plan for Rockville. I and many others are dedicated to helping in this task.
Thank you.
Sorry, you should have winked.
Thanks for holding us accountable.
All right.
Yeah.
We got a plan, huh?
Yes, ma'am.
We're gonna do it.
We're gonna work a plan.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. We will now move to community forum, agenda item 7. All persons addressing the mayor and council are able to speak in a civil and courteous manner, and members of the audience will continue to be respectful of others. We do a great job of that here. Each person will be allowed 3 minutes. Speakers will be called in order of requests received, and we ask that you adhere to the 3 minutes allowed. Ms. Taylor Farrell is going to be helping with the clock. There will be a time clock in front of you as well, and you will hear an audible beep at the end of your 3 minutes. Please clearly state your name and address, or say if you're within the city of Rockville, as you're able and willing. And in-person speakers will be called before virtual speakers. We do have some folks who have signed up in advance, and then we'll move to our virtual speakers. But if you have not signed up and would like to, then please feel free to see Judy Penny in the back. There is a sign-up sheet. Welcome, Frances Bevington. Thank you.
I have the dubious honor of going first tonight. My name is Frances Bevington. I live at 7 Watchwater Court in Rockville. I'm a member of the Cultural Arts Commission and recently represented the CAC on the Artist Selection Committee for the College Gardens mural. I want to thank and commend the city on its process for developing this and the Twin Brook mural, which are both projects that have been made possible by Rockville's Art in Public Places program. I've served on multiple selection committees for the city, and there were several new steps that were put in place for these 2 murals, which I feel greatly increased the integrity and professionalism of the process. First, the city conducted a survey to collect information about residents' priorities and preferences for public art in these locations prior to issuing the call for artists. This information was shared with the artists as they were completing their proposals, and I think this step was key to both attracting highly professional public artists and helping them understand the priorities of Rockville's residents as they developed their proposals. In the case of College Gardens, our residents expressed their appreciation for the park's natural setting and wildlife and priorities of environmental conservation. Second, city staff attended civic association meetings in both communities slated for murals and heard directly about the importance of these spaces from the residents that use them most frequently. Third, city staff developed objective criteria for the Artist Selection Committee, who for the first time included members from the community's civic associations and who evaluated the artist proposals. These criteria helped focus the discussion and quantify the strengths of each proposal. The College Garden Selection Committee used this criteria to choose 4 finalists who presented their concepts to the committee. All of the finalists presented strong concepts, which I believe is a testament to Rockville's efforts to make sure that residents' voices were heard during this process. The selection committee unanimously chose to recommend Andy Dahl for the College Gardens mural, whose high-impact, colorful concept drew inspiration directly from the natural setting of the park by featuring local wildlife and plants and reflected the priorities expressed by Rockville's residents both in the survey and at civic association meetings. This recommendation is also unanimously supported by the CAC. Although I didn't serve on the selection committee for the Twin Brook mural, I did participate in the CAC's unanimous motion to support the selection committee's recommendation of LaToya Peoples, and I can say that I was truly impressed with her thoughtful and beautiful concept. My fellow commissioner, Kristen Cash, will share more with you about Twin Brook. I enthusiastically hope that Mayor and Council will choose to accept these recommendations during tonight's meeting and approve both the College Gardens and Twin Brook murals to move forward. Thank you.
Perfect timing. Thank you. Welcome, Dr. Kristen Cash, followed by Becca Fulton.
Hello, thank you. More than a little nervous. First time. I'm Kristen Cash. I live at 110 Monroe Street, just around the corner. I'm professor of art history at Montgomery College, Rockville resident business owner, member of the CAC, and I was on the artist selection committee for the Twin Brook Annex project. The proposed design by Ms. LaToya Peoples, the unanimous recommendation of the selection committee and CAC, is quite simply one of the best I've ever seen in terms of its artistic merit, community engagement, and the capacity of Ms. Peoples as a lead artist and project manager. The 3 criteria we scored in our selection process. I've been on a lot of selection committees, and this process, as my colleague so eloquently stated, is one of the most professional, structured, and transparent ones I've ever been a part of. Let's see. We followed, for the Twin Brook mural project, we followed the exact same process that Frances outlined, which follows best practices for both artist selection and public art, which is unique in the need for artists to meet artistic, technical, and administrative challenges while integrating community input and engagement along the way. I'm extremely confident in the efficiency and integrity of the selection process, which is evident in its outcome, the extraordinary design by Ms. Peoples of a mural that is representative and worthy of the residents of Twin Brook. Ms. Peoples' design is the product of her deep research and meaningful incorporation of input from community surveys and conversations. To clarify, because it's not in the materials you have in your agenda, some of the imagery, it's her mock-up, right? So there's some elements of the mural that are placeholders, like the children and maybe the final flowers, little things like that, little big things like that. The final imagery will come from artists' further conversations with the community. For me, this design is so thoughtful. It is so layered. It is so beautiful that it's hard to summarize in a short statement. And I'm an art historian, so double hard. So I'll just say that every component in her design is intentional and profound. From the choice of the local flora to represent the passage of time, the setting of the farm at the Twin Brooks. We're like, that's where it comes from, great. The corn and the blanket to honor the indigenous peoples whose land we live on, and the plowed field, a nod to the agricultural roots of Rockville and the invisible labor of the free and enslaved workers that made it possible. And then there are those beautiful, smiling children. Again, they're placeholders. The final design will more closely represent the diversity of the community, and the final figures will be a result of her further conversations. But she captures their energy, their joy, their pride in being in and of that place, being of Twin Brook. So I will just conclude by saying that all art makes you stop and look, but great art makes you want to look again and again. And that is what Ms. Peoples has accomplished in this design. Really great art.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. I am Becca Fulton, the current chair of the Youth Commission and a City of Rockville resident. To my right are the other members of the Youth Commission. I come before you today to speak about the proposed changes to the resolution and to share some of our future goals and initiatives as a commission. The purpose of the Youth Commission is to serve as a way to connect the youth of Rockville with their local government. And on April 26th, the Youth Commission met and identified areas of improvement under the current resolution such that we could achieve this goal to its utmost capacity. Among these changes included adjusting the age requirements on the application from ages 16 to 21 to instead those enrolled in grades 7th to 12th. This serves to allow greater youth participation and welcomes a more diverse perspective of our Youth Commission. Additionally, we defined each commissioner with a one-year term with the possibility of re-election for one additional term. This simplifies the process that is currently in place and allows for a more active and engaged commission. Finally, another change we made was we proposed to increase the number of mandatory meetings per year from 7 to 8. To allow for more action to be done as a commission. We strive to advocate for each and every youth across the city of Rockville, and opening the door to middle school students allows these kids to take a hands-on approach to exacting the change that they want to see in our city. Additionally, by increasing the number of required meetings per year, we provide commission members the opportunity to plan for testimonies, create policy, and discuss outstanding community issues. These changes to the resolution will ensure that local government is easily accessible to all youth that are eager and willing to get involved. Additionally, the importance of gathering these perspectives from different backgrounds cannot be understated. Our city is full of people from all different walks of life, and as their representatives, it is our duty to make sure that their voices are heard. Our most immediate goal as a commission is to launch advertisements to spread awareness about the opportunity that this commission presents for students across our city. In spite of our slow start, which I would like to thank the mayor and council for really getting the youth commission going, and with these updates to the resolution, we are excited to hit the ground running and welcome more applicants. Given these aforementioned changes, we would like to thank you all again. The applications are currently rolling, and we are grateful to have the support of Mayor and Council as we move forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Welcome. Welcome Vincent Russo, followed by John Becker.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Vincent Russo. I live at 1019 DeBeck Drive. I want to begin with a warm welcome to our new city manager and wish him all the best in service to the city. So welcome, Mr. Mihalik. Tonight's agenda is a nice welcome because it's sort of like a greatest hit album of the last 5 years. Lots of items coming back that have been well researched, and I hope are indicative of some final action. I'm particularly happy to see progress on the detached accessory dwelling units changes, and I hope that you resolve tonight to make that process easier to apply for ADUs in the city and to continue to relax the parking requirements for locations that are close to transit. I'm also pleased to see the city's branding initiative finally coming together, and look forward to seeing that move along. But I'm mainly here tonight to support the application for 900 Rockville Pike. Your agenda details the long history of this planned development, going back more than 17 years when it was conceived as a billiard store. I live a few blocks from the site, and passing by for so many years, seeing this essentially a lost opportunity on the Pike for in terms of lost activation of the space. It's vacant. It really adds nothing, and certainly doesn't contribute very much to the tax base of the city. So I hope that this plan moves forward. It's a complex site with a very constrained configuration, and especially now with the setbacks required for the BRT and the shared use path, this proposal accommodates those features, and I think it deserves your approval. While the neighboring property owners' claims over the shared driveway have been rejected in court, the applicant has settled and satisfied the city's demands, so it's time to finally move forward. In particular, I think we should look forward to the improved pedestrian experience around that corner, which is now quite a dangerous sidewalk that abuts right close to the edge of the Pike. So this is a wonderful opportunity, and I hope you advance it. I won't be able to join you next week, so I will submit comments in support of your 5906 Halpine Road application, and see that as an opportunity to add some housing close to Metro. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Mr. Becker.
My name is John Becker. I live at 148 Monroe Street, which is at Americana Center. I'm a resident homeowner, and that's right across the street from the Rockville Metro Station. Briefly tonight, I'm just going to go through a list of items here. I'm just going to mention them. I'm going to follow up with you folks next week and also in your first September meeting so we can try to address these issues. Tomorrow, before the Montgomery County Council in the afternoon, there's going to be a bill brought up for the county to vote to move for public hearing, Bill 1424, which addresses the abatement noise cameras that they're going to discuss, and that was what's recently passed in the state legislature this year, thanks to Julie Polakovich-Carr and a few other folks. So one of the things on this is going to take some time, and I have to tell you, I can't say on behalf, but my neighbors at Americana Center and in the area up and down Rockville Pike on East Jefferson are suffering with this noise and speeding constantly in the morning, noon, at night, and early in the morning on weekends. So we're going to have to address this as mayor and council and the Department of Police, and that's something we'll discuss later. Street lights. You got some street lights on during the day, and there are a couple of neighborhoods where they just come on even if it gets a cloud in the sky. So that's something that's going to have to be addressed. And again, I'll forward some information on that as far as locations and things like that by next week's meeting. I mentioned back in June and also earlier this month, it's time for a town hall for Town Center. Mayor and council, chief of police, department heads, Ready, Rockville Economic Development, Moorguard, and business community, and maybe some District 17 folks, Sid Katz with the county council. I would like to have this scheduled for sometime in September. I know I'd like to have a lot of things, but your schedule is something else, and curating the location is something else. But it's time to find out what's going on, what is working, who's doing what haven't they done, and what's the plan for the future. And it applies to all parties that I've just mentioned, you guys and all the other folks too. Another streetlight thing. A lot of them are blocked by bushes, leaves, limbs, and things like that. Again, I'll put that out in an email and some documentation to you by next week's meeting. And there's some sidewalk repairs that need to be done for mobility issues as well as just walking around. That's in Town Center and other locations adjacent to Town Center. And I think there's an issue with potholes and street repairs in the city. Some city streets, there's some sort of temporary pothole or street utility repair, and it never gets to be a permanent fix. And, you know, it's just something that's got to be looked into. And again, I will present something to you prior to next week's meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, and good luck.
Thank you very much. That concludes the last person who has signed up in advance. We have received written comments shared with us by the city clerk's office. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Thank you very much. A lot of great topics today. We'll now move to agenda item 8A, presentation of Cultural Arts Commission annual report. Welcome. I will also note while you're coming up that there's 2 items on consent that relate to the Cultural Arts Commission, and council members may ask questions about it during your presentation.
Sure. My name is Karen Askin. I live at 733 Falls Grove Road. This has been the best of times for the arts and the worst of times for the arts. Thanks to mayor and council, we hired an arts and culture manager, Corinne Miller. Sadly, she is gone on to an amazing job in the district. Those of us that had the chance to work with Corinne can attest to her work ethic and her vision. Corinne was, as our deputy city manager said, Corinne was a unicorn. And the CAC has confidence that the city manager, along with Barack, will find the next unicorn, because after all, if there is one, there are more. So we look forward to working with them. You, I assume, have the report. One of the things that I really detest the most is people who read PowerPoint presentations. So I'm not really going to do that tonight. What I am going to do is focus on the what our priorities are for the CAC. And I think that some of these were identified by Corinne before she left, and give us the opportunity to really make some great changes. So first of all, we need to update and digitize the city's collection of art. It is huge, but we don't know what kind of condition all of it is in. And it is, I think, incumbent and smart for mayor and council to be able to have citizens look on the website and see all the amazing art that you all have funded over 30 plus years. You have over 50 pieces in the permanent collection. But we need to focus on systematic and reliable maintenance of those. And we need to work with other departments to bake the arts in early as we look at development, not to think of it as an add-on. In terms of the second priority, which is going to be collaboration and community outreach, as Kristen and Francis talked about, the amount of outreach that has been done by the CAC and by Corinne when she was here to bring the community into the planning process, not at the end, but at the very beginning. Public art is supposed to be just that, public art, art that comes from the bottom up and not from the top down. It is about building relationships with the communities. It's looking for ways to create partnerships and opportunities with the private sector. After all, unless mayor and council want to be the only funder of public art, we need to find a way to work with our businesses and with our communities so that art moves outside of our parks, our recreation centers, our community centers. Now that's great. It makes for beautiful parks, but not every citizen goes to parks. And we need to meet our communities where they are and to listen to them. And then in terms of the future, this is about, we've worked very hard on code and ordinance changes that are working their way through the system. The new city manager will ultimately be the person who's going to carry this ball, but we need to create a good, solid, formal base to move forward. And so we are going to need to develop a strategic plan for the arts, something we have not had in a very, very, very long time. We're long overdue. And that's a monstrous job. And then, it's how can the city really engage the our community in the arts? How can we use the arts to have hard discussions, to make our spaces more beautiful? And so as we move forward, I'm really excited about what we've done in the past couple of years. I look forward to doing much, much more. You will see me many more times than you want to see me, I promise. And if you have any questions about the two projects that are in front of you, Twin Brook and College Gardens. I'm happy to answer those along with Barack, who has been the staff person working on that.
Thank you. I will just start off and say a huge thank you to the Cultural Arts Commission as liaison. I have seen the hard work that you put in, and I'm thrilled. You literally are making the city more beautiful. And I think art is a part of, uplifting the human spirit. It's also part of economic development, and it also has a role in telling our history and sharing our history to generations forward. So thank you very, very much for all the work you're doing. And I know that the arts are multi-level. It's not just what is a mural or a physical painting. There's performing arts. There's so many different ways that we can express ourselves in the city, and you're really doing a great job to help support our community. I will just give some kudos. I know that we have some artwork now in City Hall. It's in the presentation if anyone wants to see some of the pictures, but the Bloomberg grant is going to help support some artwork and also help improve pedestrian safety, we hope. So that's going to be coming up. And then again, thank you for the murals. I know that we're going to have 2 on consent agenda tonight, but also there are other murals that are going up in Lincoln Park Community Center and others. And then I know that Viz Arts is also working with a business owner, Morgart, to help look at arts in Rockville Town Square. So I just want to give a huge kudos and a thank you for helping to make our city more beautiful and attractive.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think that those 3 are great examples of moving art outside of what it has traditionally, public art outside of what it traditionally has been. It is about making those connections. It is about working with businesses so that everybody is invested in our community.
Thank you. I can't wait to see all that happens. I look with envy at some other cities at the murals that they're putting up, and I can't wait to see them here.
You'll see Bloomberg next week, and I can state ahead of time that without a doubt that was the most amazing, rigorous, professional art panel that I've ever had the pleasure of sitting on. People from all over the DMV who have a lot of expertise and a lot to teach us. So I'm really excited about that project. Besides, my window looks right down on that crosswalk. So
wonderful.
I'm really excited.
All right, Dr. Miles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to echo the mayor's thanks to you and the other members of the Cultural Arts Commission, all the volunteer time, hours, blood, sweat, and tears that, as she said, goes into making our city more beautiful. I hope I don't lose my seat here on City Council by saying this, but I'll say my second favorite city in Maryland is Baltimore, and every time I go back, the murals are awesome, and I'm excited that one of the persons selected to potentially do the mural at Twin Brook is from the Baltimore area. I'm excited about that, as well as the other mural, and that's why Rockville is my first favorite city.
Better be.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Miles, it's a great testament to the city's program that when these RFPs and RFQs go out, we get people from all over the country who want their art in our city. And, as God is my witness, we're going to make Rockville an arts destination, or I will die trying. So.
Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. I just also want to echo my colleagues and the mayor in thanking you for your work. And I saw the mock-up of the Twin Brick mural, and it is absolutely beautiful. I did have some questions in how we are interpreting some of the history, particularly around the history of the enslaved people. I noticed in the briefing book we talk about the farm being a tribute to enslaved people. And I think that may be a very sensitive issue in how we're framing that type of history. And I think that we need to consider that it was worded in a way that we were providing a tribute to enslaved people for clearing the land, and understanding that clearing the land is in fact an act of oppression and slavery. And so I think we just need to look at the way in which we're framing the history. And I know that we'll have later discussions on that, but I just wanted to point that out.
You make an excellent point. Words matter. They really do. And, there is a difference between recognizing the history, paying tribute to it. And I think that, Kristen was absolutely right when she said that this artist takes her job of bringing forth what the community was, is, and will be. And, these pieces, these murals, they're going to be up forever. I mean, well, for a long, long time. And, that's a challenge for artists. How am I relevant to the past, to the present, and the future? And I think this artist is really up to the task.
Thank you. I will just add, I initiated that discussion last week with my colleagues and the city manager on just the way we're representing that. I will say the artist is incredible. I've looked at her work and wow, it is beautiful, compelling, bright. I just wanted to make sure as we look at Rockville's history that we don't inadvertently give more airplay to people or a family name in the past that enslaved people. We have that on our streets and in a lot of other places already. And so I would like to just, as even in the description, find ways to uplift the people who have been oppressed or not recognized in our city in the past. So I gave a heads up to the team that that's something that I just want to make sure as we go forward.
I certainly urge, all the city council members to, if you have suggestions or concerns, to bring them forward. We are, right now we don't have a manager for arts and culture. Mr. Tite is becoming an arts expert, whether he wanted to be or not, but he's very good at communicating to us what it is that that you're looking for and that you think is appropriate.
Thank you, and I think he has the comments from a couple of us who have shared that. So, all right. Councilmember Valeri.
Okay, thanks.
A few more questions.
Karen's like, oh, Councilmember Valeri.
Melissa, of all the people, you're a Twin Brook resident. How could I walk away from you?
Twin Brook, I feel more often than not very compelled to speak in particular. But some of the questions regarding the processes could also be applied to College Gardens. So what I say generally, again, my frame is Twin Brook because those are the people that can stop me at the grocery store, stop me at Lottie Market and be like, what are you doing? But I'll hit up a grocery store near College Gardens and maybe I can get that feedback. I noted that there was a process for engaging the Lincoln Park community, and it looked slightly different than the process for these two murals insofar as who had a seat at the table from the beginning. And I think that the gist of my concern, it's interesting on this evening, the phrase that I used, nothing for us without us, in regards to the ADA, it is about representation. And my concern was the process that was utilized for the murals, the intentionality behind community at the table from the beginning to be able to give that context. As somebody who does know that Twin Brook is named after Twin Brooks, who also recognizes that, we have a myriad on the north and south side of Veers Mill, roads named after World War II battle locations. It was very much a post-World War II. That is part of our story. That's how we got here. I also think it's something that has a problematic history to it as well with redlining, but I didn't necessarily see that expressed as far as part of the history, which could be a missed opportunity. But I don't want to be prescriptive in what the artist does or does not do. But my initial reaction is to say, where was the community truly engaged? So knowing how many people took the survey, knowing how many total residents were engaged. I was present for the presentation to our community association, which I used to be president of, and I know exactly how small percentage of our population of the neighborhood comes to our meetings. That's not to say that, you know, the community organization does great work. But suffice it to say, I'm concerned. Materials are put out in English only. We have a huge population of people who English is not their first language. And I feel like that voice is really missed. So I'd want to know more about what the engagement looked like. What was the demographic breakdown of the nominating committee? It was actually very helpful that you noted who was from, you know, particular neighborhoods, but to know that the voices were there from the beginning and that helped shape that would be very helpful to me to address any concerns. But having said that, I will take you up on your offer to chat more about. I love talking about art, but in particular, talking about how we can create real meaningful community engagement that goes beyond an email or an online survey and gets into community feedback.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Lincoln Park. That project is going to result in the city of Rockville getting a mural for free. That is a grant that, as the community outreach director of VisArts, I wrote for a Maryland State Arts Council grant. We got a planning grant, and we were lucky enough to get an implementation. That's a $30,000 piece of artwork that's going to belong to the city. And so I had the luxury of doing community outreach the way I wanted to do community outreach. And when we sent letters in Spanish and English to every address in Lincoln Park, and we asked for feedback. Half of them came back, and we got really no survey answers. And I was like, well, this isn't going to work. So I started literally going to the community center on the weekends and talking to people. And it takes a lot of work. We're on a journey. We have gone from, since I joined the CAC, to the community input being people from other boards and commissions to actually people in the community. But you're right, it takes a lot of work to find those people. You know, Monique knows how hard it is. Thank goodness we built the relationship we did with Lincoln Park, because that stood us in good stead when there was an issue with the destruction of a piece of public art. It's all about relationships, but you all know that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of staff time to do that, and I think we're getting better and better and better at it. And like I said, we're there. The CAC is really committed to going to communities and asking them what they want. You know, I learned a long time ago, you can't tell people what you think they want and have it matter. You've got to ask them, what is it that you want? These are your communities. And so I think we're getting there, and I'm hopeful that the new person will, you know, follow in Corinne's very big footsteps, you know, and we'll be there every step of the way. I don't want to turn my back on anybody.
I will just say, just because the Twin Brook Annex serves such a special role, that, and I know that September will be here before we know it, and kids will be back in there. But I just want to note that there is a great after-school program that the City of Rockville helps to support, and it would be awesome if, and I know you guys have built in community outreach with folks as part of the artist grant. So I just want to encourage that the children and the parents and others who use that space.
Right, and I think that is a big change, is that when we talk to artists, we're actually saying to them, what's your plan for community outreach? How are you going to involve them? It's like at Lincoln Park, we're going to be doing paint days where the kids and folks come in and actually participate within reason, the painting of the mural. Because if the community invests in the mural, it matters, and they protect it. They're not going to graffiti it up.
Thank you. Yes. I see Councilman Van Grack.
First of all, again, I echo my colleague's statements, so thank you for everything you're doing. I want to take a little bit a different direction, ask you a question. I agree with you. Rockville's arts culture is fantastic, and what you're doing to exemplify it and highlight it is fantastic. I want to get your thoughts. I know there's been some discussion in the past about designated an area or areas in Rockville as a Maryland Arts and Entertainment District. Whether you have any thoughts about that, whether you think it could benefit the artist and artistic community in Rockville and in our community.
I think that was something that was on Corinne's list. As I understand it, an arts and entertainment district is primarily about tax credits. It's focused on bringing development in and making art part of that. I hope that downtown Rockville gets designated as an arts and entertainment district. You have the metro. There's density, and density that I think we all know needs to get denser, for lack of a better term. We need more people there. We need to make it an exciting place. And I think we will get there. But you know better than most people, it all comes down to, good art costs money. Artists deserve to be paid a living wage for what they do. Who's going to pay? We have, talk to VisArts, they have like 15 projects that they could throw at you in any given moment. But the question always is, who's going to be the funder, which is why I come back to, it's so important that the city figure out and codify how these public-private partnerships are going to work. If it's a combination of money from different sources, who owns it? Who's responsible for maintenance? Who makes those decisions? Right now, that doesn't exist.
Thank you. Just two last comments. One is, I know that there was, I believe, around 2011, there was a plan, a very old plan. And then in 2019, we did the study of arts and culture for the city of Rockville. I just wanted to note that I do support developing a plan when we do hire someone. I think that'll be a critical step to not only protecting our existing assets, but doing what you said, look at how we can allow this to flourish. That's something that we'll engage the new leader about, but I just wanted to acknowledge that comment you made. And then I wanted to also acknowledge that Rockville does have a series of other performing arts groups, visual arts groups, and literary groups. So I wanted to note that they are also an important part of the arts in our city.
They are.
Thank you.
If I had a full-time job with you, I might be able to get to it, but my job at VisArts is my day job, so.
Yeah. People can look at some of the art we have on our website and find out where it is. I know that Rockville Town Center Master Plan is going to be coming to us, and there's some mention in there about arts and culture. And then just since we have folks listening, take a look at some of the performing arts, whether that's the Rockville Little Theater and others. They have upcoming performances, and they're very good.
And kind of as a coming to a space near you soon is that the county's liquor store on North Washington, one of the uglier buildings in the city, drab, gray, terrible, really just nothing. Viz Arts is working with the DLC. They've identified some funds to do a mural on that building, and that is what we need more of. We need more businesses saying, yeah, let's do something that makes this space better, more of a neighborhood. So we'll bring that to you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate everything the
Anything
Cultural
else?
Arts
I don't
Commission
want
is
it to
doing.
be-
No? Good. And as you were talking, I saw a lot of shaking heads in the audience about that building, so. We are right on time for consent agenda, so I'm really excited. And I also just wanted to note, we do have several items on consent, the Art in Public Places for Twin Brooks Annex mural, which we have heard about, as well as for College Gardens Park mural. There was some clarification by the city manager today on what we're actually approving. It's not the final art. It is going to be to work through procurement to secure the artist, and then there will be substantial community outreach and then final rendering shared. Agenda item 9C, authorize the city manager to execute a declaration of forest and tree conservation covenants for the Rockville Swim and Fitness Center. That's a big pool project that's going to be starting in August. I know that there'll be a closure of the pool to get some of the projects underway for the fantastic renovation on the outdoor side. Adopt a resolution amending Resolution 15-21 to establish the Youth Commission, specifically to replace references to Montgomery College with references to the middle school, lower the age of the Youth Commission to include members who are in grades 7 through 12, as well as to change the terms to be one-year terms with options for renewal, and increase the minimum meetings from 7 to 8, as well as change references in the mission of the Youth Commission from young adults to college, and college to youth and middle school. And authorize, letter E, authorize and award the city manager to execute a contract with Colossal Contractors for bus stop maintenance services responsive to IFB 31-24, and then approval of minutes as agenda item F. Colleagues, how do you want to proceed? Do you want to pull any items, or do you want to take them as a group? I see Dr. Miles, and I see Councilmember Valeri.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to move them as a group, but I'll defer to my colleagues.
Councilmember Valeri.
Madam Mayor, I would like to pull consent agenda item A and B for questions and perhaps clarification.
Colleagues, what say you? Dr. Miles.
Madam Mayor, may I make a motion to move consent agenda items 9C, 9D, 9E, and 9F?
Yes, you may. Do we have a second? Councilmember Grack seconds. Thank you, Dr. Miles. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All right. I know we had extensive discussion on consent agenda item A and B, but let's move to the questions that you may have. Please proceed, Councilmember Valeri.
I'm never sure if I can just proceed on those things. So this would be for staff, so perhaps Mr. Matite. I would like to know the answers to the questions for both the Twin Brook Annex and College Gardens murals, about how many people took the survey, how many total residents were engaged, what was the demographic breakdown of the nominating committee as a whole, and then what I'm struggling with, beside the fact that the language, perhaps the recommendation was imprecise to what we're actually agreeing to, and we have this all sorted out now, concept versus artwork. I also find that if there are these processes in place, and as the chair of the CAC noted, the artists themselves have shared their outreach approach, their ideas. Were they all reflected in the report that we got? Are there additional materials that we haven't seen? That would help me to understand perhaps more about this process. I just felt like there wasn't a lot of meat specifically around outreach, and a community mural lives or dies by community outreach and engagement. So those are my questions, not to totally put you on the spot, but put you on the spot. If you need to come back, that makes sense. I don't want to hold back on the procurement side of things, but I want to put a note in it that these questions to me are extremely important as we proceed forward.
Thank you for the question. The first questions, the survey result breakdown, we can be able to provide that. We actually did have Montgomery College intern work on the survey analysis, so we actually do have those, and we'll be able to share that with the entire mayor and council. To the second question, I think from what we've shared with mayor and council, we will have to have additional discussion with the artists so that we can be able to provide and engage what the additional engagement and outreach plan will be. So we have to have that dialogue with both artists, but we can't be able to do that right now because we don't have a contract with them. So we will have to do that, and to some of the things that you all have shared, we'll pass those and convey those to them, and they can be able to incorporate that as part of their outreach and engagement plan that they'll have to develop.
Councilmember Valeri, do you have any follow-up questions?
Yes, thank you for providing that, after our meeting and being able to share that more publicly. I would like to still know the demographic breakdown of the nominating committees to ensure that a variety of backgrounds and viewpoints were at the table from the beginning. I think that's critical. So if you have that answer, again, if you need to come back, I understand, but that was included in my questions, as well as how many total residents were engaged, people responding to the survey, people going to a meeting. That would be helpful as well. And broadly, again, to go back to the CAC chair, the artists, correct me if I'm wrong, the artists came forward with their proposals that included their outreach approach, strategies. That's what I was looking for as well. So I understand some of it has to be developed, but the artists are also developing them as part of their proposal. So do we have all of that within the staff report?
We don't have that with the artist yet. It's not in the staff report.
So it's my understanding, I'm just reading body language, that that there is some level of engagement included, but that once you go to procurement, that there'll be even more in-depth discussion
Yes.
about the actual details of the outreach. Does that sound right to you?
That's what I'm saying, yes.
Thank you. All right. Councilmember Shaw.
And just to follow up on Councilmember Valeri's point, in terms of demographics, and I know you were sharing just like different identities, but specifically, I'm interested in knowing if the demographics have been disaggregated by race or income.
Thank you. Councilmember Fulton.
Just wanted to I agree, first of all, the community engagement, we needed it and we need more of it, and there's a plan to do that, so I think that's a good thing. On the issue of demographic information, I agree. It's helpful to have it for a voice at the table, and particularly disaggregated for things like surveys. I also acknowledge the difficulty when you've listed about a dozen people that were on a committee and asking for a breakdown of their demographics if it's not self-disclosed already. So I just want to acknowledge that point on the specific question of the committee. That presents its own challenges. But I agree, representation and disaggregated demographic data on surveys would be helpful.
Councilmember Shaw.
I just wanted to confirm it was for the survey, because I think that's like the easiest way to get that information.
Councilmember Valeri.
Just for clarity, I was talking specifically about the artist nominating committee, because that would be one of the initial first steps. So per the workflow, the flow in our agenda book, it starts with the community engagement, which is the survey, emails, meetings, and then goes to the nominating committee. So both pieces, to me, would answer the question of who had a seat at the table. And to me, the nominating committees, I'm not going to disparage expertise at all, but that is a seat at the table that I am concerned that we are not doing enough to be intentional about who is at the table.
Thank you. So I'm hearing two different things. I'm hearing one is to share the results of the survey and to break down the demographic data from the survey. And then there's an interest in understanding the nominating committee. I will say the nominating committee has been selected and has done their work. But perhaps as you're building the processes going forward, I know that there's some changes that are going to be coming to us. You probably did not collect that information, to my colleague's point. So I just wanted to flag that maybe that's something that we consider for the future as a process. And also, there were some comments that we have communicated with the city manager's office. There are a couple of guardrails that we tend to have, just making sure that that's part of the process and artists get to see that as well. Any other comments, colleagues? Councilman Valeri.
So just to clarify, to put on the record, because it's different than what's in the agenda, we are moving this, moving forward with procurement and negotiating with the artists, and that's all that we are approving, correct? Because it's different than what's in the agenda book.
I'll turn to the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. You are approving a contract with the artists. You're approving a concept of what the artist is going to be doing, or else they wouldn't know how to put together a proposal. But I heard loud and clear from the city council this evening that you want a little bit more of a breakdown of the nominating committee data. I agree with the council members that if those members provide that data to us, they don't have to, they may choose not to for privacy reasons, but then we'll make sure to get that data to you as soon as possible. But moving forward, and I can't stress this enough, that there's additional opportunities for community engagement. We'll be very serious about that. We'll deeply engage the community, and we'll make sure the artist understands the wishes of the community, but ultimately this council decides on the mural when it comes back. Thank you, Mayor.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Mr. Dawson, were you wanting to add anything? Okay. So, and we are approving the ability for you, your office, to move forward in the contract, not the actual contract just yet. Just want to clarify that. Yes. Okay, perfect. Councilmember Shaw.
And I do just want to confirm that there'll be opportunities to update the draft explanation of the concept. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's what I heard earlier. Thank you for clarifying. Thank you all for your questions. Also, if the artists are listening, outstanding work. Thank you so much for coming to Rockville. And again, thank you to the Cultural Arts Commission. All right. So if there are no further questions, we would then need to move to approve these two agenda items, 9A and B. Do I have a motion to approve? Dr. Miles.
So moved.
Do we have a second? Councilman Shaw, thank you for second. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye as able. Aye. Thank you. It's approved. Thank you. All right. I also just wanted to, since the Youth Commission's here, just say thank you. Thank you for testifying earlier. We appreciate you. We'll now move to agenda item 11A, discussion and instructions on branding. This is something that has come before the previous mayor and council, as well as this one, with some initial discussion on branding, look and feel, as well as taglines. I'm buying some time for staff to be able to pull up the presentation. But I understand that this will also be an important part of moving forward on some of the website updates that we're making, as well as branding and other parts of city materials. With that, welcome, Mr. Matite and Ms. Dantzler.
Just give us 1 minute while we'll pull up the presentation.
No problem at all. Thank you. And I just want to thank you for doing the additional community outreach as a follow-up to our last discussion. We really appreciate it. While you're pulling up the presentation, I'm hearing some folks need a break. Would that be okay? Okay. Give you some time to pull it up. All right, we'll take a no more than 5-minute break.
Thank you.
Welcome back, Rockville. Today is still July 29th, and we're going to reconvene meeting 18-24, starting with 11A, discussion and instructions on branding. Welcome, Ms. Dantzler and Mr. Matite.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. On January 8th, 2024, the elected body instructed staff to work with the Medium Giant to create focus groups to gather feedback from the community on 3 reimagined logos and taglines. Staff collaborated with Medium Giant and conducted 6 focus groups. So tonight, Medium Giant is here to present those findings from the focus groups. Please welcome Jenny Kina and Sean Krugel.
Thank you, Kathy. Hello, Mayor Council. Thank you for having us. How are you?
Welcome. We're excited to have you here.
Wonderful. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
Delightful. And then Sean, I just wanted to confirm. Okay, there you are. Great. We'll hop straight into this. So as Kathy mentioned earlier this year, we were tasked with going back to the community with options selected by this Mayor Council. So the Mayor Council was presented with all of the options previously put forward for logos and also taglines, and 3 of each were selected. And then we were tasked with going back to the community. So we conducted a series of focus groups showing the options, and Sean's going to walk us through where the community feedback landed us.
Okay, so I won't belabor a tremendous amount of the research, but what we were asked to do is basically bring 3 logos and 3 taglines to another round of focus groups that was made up of different community members. I just wanted to reiterate to the mayor and council and all the people in attendance that throughout the process, we have spoken with people that represent parks, city government, arts, entrepreneurship, education, business, faith-based organizations, and social services. So at some point or another, we have either spoken live or in a focus group to people representing at least that many parts of the community. On top of it, there were 6 traits of the city of Rockville that we incorporated into our work: safety, connectedness, creativity, innovation, freedom, and empathy. And those all ladder to an idea about dynamic diversity that we talked about in previous meetings. So these were the 3 logos that we presented, and these were the 3 taglines. They were not mutually exclusive, or one was not meant to go with one or the other. That's why when we did actually do the focus groups, they were presented as 3 logos and 3 taglines. And when you'll see the results, you'll know that we paired the tagline that felt best and the logo that felt best. They weren't exclusive to each logo or tagline together. So pretty overwhelmingly, the research that we did or were asked to do for mayor and council going back focused on logo number 2 or logo B or the one in the middle, however you prefer to look at it. This was the one that they thought best captured an innovative look based on a previous look for the city. The one on the left there was a lot of positive sentiment about all of them actually, but the one in the middle felt like the one that would have the longest longevity in terms of representing all of those different areas or different areas in the city: parks, government, arts, entrepreneurship, education, business that we talked about earlier. The one on the right felt a little bit too emotional, I guess, and the one on the left felt a little too cold, I guess, if I was to sum it up that quickly for you. So pretty much everybody settled on that one in the middle. And then in regard to the taglines,
sorry, Sean.
Let me give a couple of verbatims here. I like the energy and the movement of the second option. The tail of the R is making forward movement. I love the two's boldness. I love that the heart in option 3, but something just speaks to me with the R in option 2. I think option 2 is more visually appealing. It has a nice shape. I like the arrow. And then we showed, again, different iterations of this on stationery, community or city uniforms, things of that nature, so they could see it kind of in situ. which we can share, which we shared, I think, in the initial presentation. In regard to the taglines, we had 3: rise together, for the good, and all together now. And all of these had individual rationales that all ladder to the same brief, but 3 different iterations of kind of how to bring that dynamic diversity to life. Rise together for the good and all together now. Easier decision here to go away from for the good, as it got 0 traction amongst the additional research that we were asked to do. Rise together and all together now. In fairness, had some pretty similar reactions in terms of people, in terms of equal weight, in terms of people that liked them. So all together now ultimately won out. But let me go over a couple of the verbatims just so you can see how that played out. I like all together now. It has a ring to it. It's a song. The connotation is positive. I like the word now. It's fun. It's the present tense, the present moment. It's a cool play on togetherness. All together now. It feels like a choir, encouraging them all to sing together. There's something about rise together with the sun that I really like. We do it every day, not just alternate Tuesdays. The interesting thing, if you go back one slide, Jenny, in regard to these taglines, is that rise together, for better or for worse, in some instances, cued religious. Not in a positive or negative way, but that was one thing to look out for, where all together now felt most inclusive to all of the people that we spoke with. So putting that together, you can see the logo that was chosen paired with the tagline, City of Rockville, all together now. And this is where we have landed, again, after several in-market background research, additional research suggested by this body, and here we are.
So staff is recommending that the mayor and council take this information and vote tonight on the city's new brand.
Thank you very much. I'm hearing a slight echo. I just wanted to, all right. It looks like it's gone away. So I just want to say thank you again for all the work on this. I know that there was a lot of follow-up. It's a lengthy process, and I know that branding is not easy. So thank you, Medium Giant, and thank you to our PIO team who led this effort successfully, I believe. Just to help us dissect the discussion, could we start with the logos and then we can move to the taglines?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, colleagues. So we know what the survey said, but just want to see if folks are good with the recommended middle logo, or if you have any comments. Councilmember Shaw, do you want to say something?
I still like the one with the heart.
Councilmember Jackson.
I wasn't going to say anything, but since Councilmember Shaw put herself out there, yes, I actually like the one with the heart as well. I can live with the one with the arrow, but I do like the one with the heart.
Thank you. Councilmember Van Graag.
I do like the one with the heart. However, I do think the middle one is a little bit more neutral and forward-thinking, so I would yield more towards the second choice with the more arrow aspect to the R.
I do like the forward arrow inclusion in there. I thought that was a nice touch in terms of progress and moving, always reflective, but moving forward. So thank you for that. Councilmember Fulton and then Valeri.
Thank you for the work on this. Thank you for bringing it back. When we talked about this last time, we talked about getting qualitative feedback and not quantitative feedback and not having it be a vote. Like, I remember that discussion and just getting the feel of it. However, I now recognize that actually having the vote of the focus groups is going to help us make a decision here, because to me, there was a pretty clear community feedback, and we went and we got that. So my actual personal aesthetic preference at this point, I think, is beside the point, and I think we should go with what the feedback recommended, which would be the middle option.
Thank you. Councilmember Valeri, and then Dr. Miles, would you like to weigh in?
I can completely appreciate Councilmember Fulton's approach, while still retaining the fact that ultimately there has to be a decider on this stuff. I want to like the one with the heart, but every time I see the heart, I think of Virginia is for Lovers and their tagline. And as anybody who grows up in Virginia, or in Maryland rather, don't really want to do anything associated with Virginia necessarily, no offense. But I really like the middle one. I think that it is the most polished and also the most forward-looking one as well.
Thank you. Dr. Miles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will associate myself with the comments of my colleagues Fulton and Van Graff.
Thank you. And I don't know if I'm a tiebreaker here, but I will I think that the feedback was pretty strong on this one. I did like the heart previously, and I think these are all three great options. That's the good news. And I am fine with moving forward with the recommended one for the middle. Okay. So that solves that. Next thing is the tagline, if we can move to that series. We have Rise Together for the Good and All Together Now. I will be transparent with my colleagues that I sent some questions to the city manager. I was asking two things. One is how will these all be configured in different languages, for example? So sometimes that makes an impact on what you choose. And I believe there was a discussion about Spanish and potentially Chinese. I'm seeing head shake. So just for clarification and understanding among my colleagues. I also just shared, I will be open-minded on this. I did have a concern about All Together Now. The now seems more like a command to me, and I usually like taglines to be aspirational. So it didn't have the same warmth and tone. Among the ones that did well, I think Rise Together stands out for me. But I just wanted to, let's maybe go down and see what everyone else thinks. Councilmember Jackson. I'm going to give you another degree.
Yes, that was a promotion. No, I have some of the same concerns with All Together Now, and it just hit me while I was listening to the presentation. It opens us up a little bit for ridicule, just because All Together Now is like, well, what were you before? So I actually like Rise Together as well. I think it's clean. I think it implies a sense of motion, and it's rising together. So, yeah, I like that one.
Councilmember Fulton.
One thing before we go down the line and talk about, I watched the whole last meeting on this, and I remember that I think at the end of that meeting, we had discussed asking for feedback on whether a tagline, right? There was an open question that we asked about, like, do we need the tagline? Everybody said they had raised that question, and it was, we're going to get feedback on if we need the tagline. Just remind us of that, where, like, I think there's an option of these three or none. Not voicing my own opinion, but that's what we said last time.
Thank you. I thought we did talk about that, and I think there was some interest in exploring a tagline. Councilmember Van Grack.
I first was going to say the same thing that Councilmember Fulton said, that I question whether we do need one. But obviously we don't have that data, so I'm not sure. If we're going to go with one, I would actually echo what Councilmember Jackson and the mayor said. All Together Now, it's in addition to which being a Beatles song. I don't know if that's going to come to play as a pretty popular Beatles song. I actually think All Together would be better than All Together Now, and added that. But given the choices here, if I were to go with one, I would go with Rise Together. But I also would wonder whether a tagline is necessary.
Thank you. I will just note my opinion. I like the tagline. It's better than get into it. I think we'll all agree.
Madam Mayor,
yes.
Agreed.
But I really like it. Councilmember Valeri and then Dr. Miles.
Yeah, I was just sitting here thinking, where did we end up on the do we need a tagline or not? But then I realized many of us went to the Maryland Municipal League meeting, and I ended up looking at a lot of other municipality websites through the course of the meeting, and I cannot recall one website off the top of my head where they didn't have a tagline. So that's just something to note. I'm not making a value judgment on it, but it seems pretty a regular thing to do. But having said that, I love the idea of all together now, but that presupposes that we are truly all together now. And I think that it also is very limiting in a lot of ways. If you're all together now, what are you going to do tomorrow? Whereas rising together to me seems more future forward, that you can always rise higher and higher and higher. And so for those poetic reasons, I choose Rise Together.
Thank you. Dr. Miles?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I actually like the Beatles song. I guess that's why
I like the Beatles
I
too.
would like All Together. Now, I'm agnostic. I mean, if I'm a tie-breaking vote, then maybe I'd swing one way versus the other, but I'll defer to you all on this one. But I do like All Together now.
Councilmember Shaw?
I like Rise Together, and I think the R also helps to accent that as well. And I think the All Together Now is familiar in certain cultures and not familiar in songs in other cultures. And I think Rise Together is the core of what we're doing. So, yeah.
I totally agree with that statement. Councilmember Fulton, did you want to speak back to this?
Maybe I just had a question. You raised a good point on what starts to happen to the look of it in other languages. What was the result of that? Do we know yet?
Just that it will be explored.
Okay.
There is a commitment to do it.
Okay.
And I started playing around because there is Spanish and Chinese in my household.
Yeah.
But it seemed like the All Together Now was a little bit iffy to me in other languages, is why I raised it.
Good to know.
Okay, so I think you've heard feedback from the mayor and council.
Mayor, I wasn't clear exactly where you guys all ended up.
So for the logo, we're going with the center.
Clear.
And then for the tagline, it's Rise Together.
Okay, I saw a forehead nod, so I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah, I was counting up here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So do you want to talk to us about next steps? And I know you have an exciting website that's being developed. I know that we talked about town center branding is something that a partner wants to work with us on. So, and just want to hear what you're going to do next. Thank you.
So our next steps, of course, is to meet with Medium Giant to solidify what we just decided. They will create a GSM, which is sort of like a graphic systems manual for us. They'll help us design a plan and sort of an education system for the staff in order to use this brand properly. One thing that happened with the previous brand, there was no direction on how to use it. So we'll have that as well. As far as branding is concerned with different departments, now that we have this and we can use the play on the R, that point, that +4 point, there will be sub-branding for each department. So the next step is to meet with Medium Giant, develop a plan for implementation, and then they will give us the deliverables as far as the graphics, the color schemes, because it's not just red, white, and blue. There are other colors that will be able to be used with this brand. Also, there'll be identity templates. One thing that we did ask in this scope was for a brand process recap video that will help us with outreach so that we can use that to let the community know that we are rebranding and we have a new brand.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. That was an easy night. I have one comment, but Dr. Miles, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is not to direct anybody because I have the least artistic ability among those seated here. One of the things that our colleague mentioned was, given that both Rockville and Rise Together both have an R, to what extent could there be a play on that with the logo itself? I think that was Councilmember Shaw, but just throwing it out there. I thought it was a good idea. And I'll end there.
Excellent. Thank you. I wanted to note two other things. One is that we know that Moorgard is planning to do rebranding of Town Square. I'm just asking if we can add as a next step, follow up with them to let them know what this brand will be, because I know that they were interested in this discussion. The second is, I know that we're looking at discussions with WMATA. There's an end of year report, but we specifically talked to them about potentially putting something about Rockville Town Center on the bridge, and maybe we also talked about previously about having some of the banners around Rockville Town Center refurbished. Some of them are faded, gone, broken. So if we could have that discussion to move those things forward. I just wanted to see if my colleagues have any comments or questions. I'm seeing thumbs up. Okay, and Dr. Miles, you have a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I'll stop here. I think I'm talking too much. I might get the look from my colleague here. That made me think about when I drive back and visit family. City of Gwinnett, like on the bridges and everything, it's big, it's beautiful. So I think to that end, we can just push it everywhere so that there's symmetry and just looks nice. So I totally support it.
Thank you very much. I'm seeing thumbs up. Any questions from staff on our direction and next request? Okay. All right, thank you, colleagues. Next, we will be moving to agenda item 11B, which is discussion, instruction, and possible introduction on the ordinance to amend Chapter 16 of the Rockville City Code entitled Public Ethics in conformance with state law by adding a definition of quasi-governmental entity and a name of business or legal entity, by prohibiting a former city official or employee from disclosing confidential information, by prohibiting city officials and employees from accepting gifts from entities that represent the interests of counties and municipalities, by modifying the financial disclosure requirements and including an anti-retaliation provision for individuals who report or participate in the investigation of a potential violation of local ethics laws. It's my understanding that this is really to bring us into compliance with state changes that were made in 2021. And with that, welcome Leila Fireside from the City Attorney's Office.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. As you noted, this is specifically an amendment to Chapter 16 of the Rockville City Code on Public Ethics to update the code with mandated requirements that have been provided by the state legislature. To ensure that the State Ethics Commission can timely consider this, we are asking you, as is noted in the agenda item, to introduce the ordinance, to proceed to adoption at this meeting by waiving the layover provision, and once the layover provision has been waived, the layover period, then moving to adopt the ordinance. To briefly discuss the changes, they are noted in the agenda item and in the staff report. They are exactly as state law requires. So if you have any concerns about the language, that's something you may want to discuss with our lobby team, but it's not something I can change. It expands the current prohibition on officials and employees from disclosing information that's not available to the public for economic benefit or other private information, to include former officials and employees. The amendment also includes the receipt of benefits from an association engaged in representing counties or municipalities in the definition of gifts and favors that need to be reported. There is an expansion of information that one does not disclose to the public if one of these forms are asked for, to include certain information about consideration or money that has been received from the University of Maryland Medical System, a government entity of the state, or a local government entity. And this again is required by state law. It's not really something that's open to conversation at this point unless one wishes to talk about it with the legislature for the upcoming session. There is a change in the business interest, the interest in business entities that needs to be disclosed. The old law just had 30%. And now there's a nested varying percentage, 10% of a business or other percentages of businesses that own other businesses. And this is really to make sure that as people fill out the disclosure forms, that we know all of the businesses that someone might have an interest in for the purposes of the financial disclosures in relation to whether or not somebody might need to recuse themselves from an agenda item, for example. Then there is this anti-retaliation provision. So if an official or an employee cannot retaliate against an individual who reports or participates in an investigation of a potential violation of the local ethics law or ordinance. Those are the highlights of the changes. Once approved, we would forward the signed copy to the state. The State Ethics Commission meets in September. They need to officially approve this. And then I would update the forms and the instructions that everyone gets when they go to fill out the financial disclosure forms. And then we can report to the state, as we are required to by state law, that we are in compliance by their October 1st deadline. So to sum up, mandated requirements from state law. We have reviewed them with the city's ethics commission and also with an attorney for the state ethics commission to make sure we've got the language exactly right. And we are asking you to introduce the ordinance and proceed to adoption at this meeting by waiving the layover period. And then finally, after the vote on waiving the layover period, move to adopt the ordinance. And I'm available if you have any questions about the ordinance.
Thank you very much for the work on this. I just wanted to know, I do know some of my colleagues are interested in looking and updating other parts of Chapter 16. For the purposes of this evening, I do know that we have to get in compliance with the state by a deadline. And I also know that we got at least one email from the public about this. So we are required to come into compliance with changes the state made in 2021, which is why I personally recommend that we move forward to get into compliance by their deadline. The second point I'll make is this one small tweak on page 141. I see that there are a number of departments listed, and I wanted to recommend that we add the Department of Housing and Community Development. That department didn't exist several years ago, but it is now, and so I just wanted to acknowledge and recognize that and have that added.
We can certainly consider that in a subsequent amendment. As you have mentioned, there's interest from other council members as well in looking more broadly at other amendments, and that's something that we can do. It's not posted for tonight, but I'm happy to work with Mr. Dawson to make sure that we bring back amendments that you all are interested in.
Okay, thank you. And just for clarity, if we were to introduce it with that one change, the only reason why I asked the question is because disclosures will be coming up before, around the end of the year, new year. And so I think that the department should be included like every other. Mr. Dawson.
No, I think once it's introduced and a motion is made to adopt, you can make an amendment to this, to the motion to make that slight change.
Okay, great. Thank you for the clarification. All right, colleagues, do you have any questions or comments on this? Dr. Miles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I apologize as I may have missed it in the emails that have been discussed among us. You mentioned a deadline. When do we have to get this done?
So I know that there is a meeting of the state in September, I believe, and that there's a deadline of October. So they need to review what we finally approved tonight, and then in order to hit the October deadline. But Ms. Fireside, please clarify.
You're exactly correct, Mayor. We have to get this material to the state so they can put it on their agenda for their early September meeting.
Dr. Miles.
Two follow-up questions. One, if we approve and vote on it tonight, how long then would it take you all to get it in shape? The reason I ask is for the third question I'll ask subsequently.
If the only additional change is to add the housing department director, we ought to be able to get that done by the end of this week.
Understood. The reason I ask is to the point that you raised, there has been comment from the community on this, and one of the recent comments is to what extent there should be a public hearing of sorts. Do we have time for that? It sounds like it would be tight. I know that there's some in the community have raised issues with regard to how we define confidential, given how it may have been used for better or worse in the past. I don't know if those are issues or those issues are worth discussing amongst ourselves or with the public, but I'm just putting out there just to raise the voice of the community.
Yeah, thank you. I did note that and acknowledge that comment. I do think that there, as Ms. Fireside mentioned, there will be opportunity to recommend, and I know that you all are looking at code changes broadly. So that could be another discussion, but we do need to get in compliance with the state, is what I'm hearing.
Thank you. Yes, you're correct. And the language regarding what items are confidential is the language from state law. So this is not something that a public hearing would alter.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Councilmember Fulton.
Sorry, I don't mean to be pedantic, but is there a deadline in the state legislation that says everyone must do this by October, or are we simply out of compliance and are trying to get into compliance, and October is a good date to do so because they're meeting?
There is a deadline by October 1st. We are supposed to verify to the state that we are in compliance with state law, and this is the step that we need to take in order to be able to, in good faith, sign that verification.
Appreciate that. I wasn't clear that there actually was a deadline versus we should do it. Good to know. Thank you.
Both. We should do it, and there's a deadline. Councilmember Shaw.
Just quick question for clarification. Can you explain the difference between contribution and a election contribution and a gift? Because I believe the elections were not included.
You're a council member, you're correct. This does not amend the elections laws. And so, for example, the financial disclosure form is something that is required to be submitted when somebody signs up that they're going to be a candidate. That's different from the periodic campaign finance reports that you all and any other interested candidate would need to file. So this does not change the requirements relating to our elections laws.
Thank you. I wanted to make one comment. Through the Maryland Municipal League, we've been discussing these ethics changes quite vigorously and trying to make sure that municipalities are aware of the changes. They have, and I've done at least 2 or 3 of their trainings. I want to recommend that, for the city of Rockville, that we have a training as well. Because the last training I was in, there actually were some scenario-based situations that help people understand, what can be done and what couldn't be done, and what was not quite required, but you don't want to set, have any gray area. So I just wanted to share that as a follow-up to this. I think that would be good for everyone who has to comply.
We're very interested in doing training, and the Ethics Commission, our City Ethics Commission, is very interested in doing that as well.
Thank you very much. I see Councilmember Jackson and then Councilmember Van Graff, please.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I just want to say to Ms. Fireside, thank you for all the help in understanding this ethics ordinance or whatever it is. But you've answered all my questions, and I thank you for that because I know that I have a lot. And also thank you for your help with the ethics that we have to fill out. I know that we've had some back and forth, and you've been really helpful in explaining what I need to do and how I need to do it and when. And so that's really helpful. So all that is to say that I'm really comfortable moving forward with this. I think it's a good thing. And as you explained, We have to do it because the state mandates that we do. So I'm for it, and I think, you know, at the end of this discussion, we should have a motion and get it off our plate.
Thank you. Councilman Van Grack will go next, and then I just wanted to make sure we're clear. We will introduce it, and then after that, we'll waive the layover period. We'd need a supermajority for that, and then we'll all vote on a motion. So, Councilman Van Grack, proceed.
So first, Ms. Fireside, I want to say that anything that I'm saying here does not go against. This was excellently drafted. I agree with this, and I'm going to be supporting introduction. I just wanted to add, because I agree with you, the language that is in 1622 is very standard language with regard to confidential information. I note that, however, in specifically our code, there are certain areas where we do define what is confidential information, often designated by the city attorney's office. I believe this is intended to be broader than just those limited sections of the code. So I'd consider and ask the city attorney's office if there's potentially could be an addition, not now, but later on when we're talking about additional drafting, of a clarification definition of what confidential information is. I know that in the state and federal code, when they do that, they often have specific designations to clarify what that is. And I don't want the city to get in the issue of having too limited or too broad a definition for that standard, what we have in section 1622. Just something for the city attorney's office to consider, but as drafted, excellently done, and I support its introduction and adoption here.
Thank you, and we're happy to look into it and make sure that we've benchmarked it against the model code that's put out by the state.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To be clear, Mayor, so we need a vote on waiving the layover period and then the vote on the ordinance.
Right, and for my colleagues, I know Councilman Valeri has something to say as well, but introduction does not require additional, a second, so I just want to clarify that. All right, thank you.
No, that's helpful. I'm still learning the ropes. I should know it by now. I just wanted to say very quickly, thank you for answering my questions, but also thank you for being very helpful in kind of explaining, you know, the process and what, you know, it was helpful to me to get really good grounding on what's in there to be able to have the conversation later on how we can improve it, how we can make it more robust, how maybe we could even include findings and purpose and other wonderful things that I've seen in other jurisdictions' code. So I just wanted to use my opportunity to say thank you very much for all the work that you did on that. And so, yes, I would like to introduce, looking, where's my section? Oh, it's right here. I'd like to introduce the ordinance to amend Chapter 16 of the Rockville City Code entitled Public Ethics in Conformance with State Law.
Thank you for the introduction, and now we need a motion to waive the layover period. Councilmember Fulton.
I move to waive the layover period on what we just introduced.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Councilman Van Grack, thank you, and thank you, Councilmember Fulton. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All right. Now we'll need a motion to adopt. I will just make one recommendation that the motion include a minor amendment to add the Department of Housing and Community Development to the list of departments. Dr. Miles.
So moved.
Do we have a second? Councilmember Shaw, thank you. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. 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 It passes. Thank you very much. Thank you for all the hard work on this. We'll now move to agenda item 11C, discussion and instructions to staff on zoning text amendment, TXT 2019-0025, to amend the zoning ordinance to allow detached accessory dwelling units in residential zones. Mayor and Council of Rockville applicants.
Good evening. So we are here for discussion and instructions regarding the detached ADUs zoning text amendment. So just a little refresher on the background. Definition of a detached accessory dwelling unit is a secondary dwelling unit within a detached accessory building located on the same lot as a single unit detached dwelling. And this is currently not allowed in the city code, but the comprehensive plan supports detached ADUs for residential lots, and the mayor and council has expressed support for increased affordable housing opportunities in the city.
Can I, sorry to interrupt, one question. ADUs can happen in the city, but they have to go through special exception, is that not right? I know that last term we voted to reduce the fee to make it even more accessible from a $3,000 fee to lower, but this would just allow it so it doesn't have to go through the special exception process, is that right?
Not quite.
Okay, please clarify.
Previously, the special exception only allowed for attached ADUs. And the previous mayor and council adopted the text amendment that did away with the special exception requirements for those. This will add detached ADUs, in other words, an ADU that's within an accessory building that's not part of the regular single-family home.
Okay,
So
and I know we'll get
we
to,
did not permit.
I know we'll get to the non-compliant, but we do have ADUs in the city, but maybe they had the breezeway and are officially considered attached.
Correct.
But are really external to the building. Thank you.
So just moving on to some of the discussion points. So regarding non-compliant units, the recommendation for the ordinance is to provide a grace period of a year upon adoption for those non-compliant units to be brought into compliance or grandfathered into compliance. And we would investigate waiving fees and other incentives to bring those units into compliance. And then regarding compatibility with the main dwelling unit, we would retain the current language in the draft ordinance, but note that compatibility is subject to review by planning staff and also subject to zoning requirements and applicable neighborhood design guidelines. And then regarding standards for an ADU located in an existing accessory building, the recommendation would be to allow existing accessory buildings to be converted to an ADU, even if the ADU has a gross floor area less than 400 square feet. And staff suggests increased flexibility here just to allow for tiny homes and smaller studio units, while also guaranteeing a minimum ADU size. And then regarding parking requirements, the off-street parking requirements for detached ADUs are recommended to be eliminated. And then getting into some of the discussion points that were discussed by Mayor and Council at the last meeting. Regarding review and inspection, the rental license reviews and inspections will be responsive and then ensure the units are maintained in a safe condition. And then we talked a lot about addresses for ADUs. So right now the recommendation is to retain the language, but to consult with the U.S. Postal Service on an acceptable way to ensure mail delivery to those ADUs. And then the staff recommendations are to, again, provide direction on these discussion points and any other items to allow for the preparation of a draft ordinance and then to introduce and adopt the ordinance on September 9th.
Are you done? Okay. First, this has been a long time coming, even before I was on council, and so I'm thrilled that this is here. I know we took care of the attached ADUs, as you mentioned. We have not yet finished on the detached, and I know this is an important part of our broader housing discussion. So one is just want to say thank you for moving this forward. I know that you had requested a hold previously because you wanted more time to think through implementation, but I just want to thank you for this. I know that a lot of people have been waiting for us to make a decision. I'm going to open up to my colleagues. There are 4 areas, and I see you have listed some of these in here, that I think we should weigh on as a body. And I think the first I'll raise is the addresses. The second I'll raise is the question on ownership, having the owner. There's a piece in there about having the owner reside. The third is how we handle compliance with those that are not currently under compliance. And then the fourth is the parking discussion. If you all are okay, we can take those one by one and so that we're clear. Is that all right with you all? Is there anything else that I missed that you wanted to discuss about this? Councilmember Fulton.
It came up at the public hearing, but I just wanted to clarify the language and where we landed on compatible with, consistent with, character, appearance. I think so I don't know if we need to have that conversation too. I know, but my view is we should, the most we should do is consistent with the appearance, not the character, not compatible with. I would also offer out there that we could say nothing, because we already have design guidelines where we have them, and we have the zoning requirements where we have them. So I do think that might be another area for conversation.
I added that as the 5th. All right. Councilmember Short, did you have another discussion item?
Yeah, I had a question about affordability.
Absolutely. Okay, so we'll put 7 as affordability. I do have some broad questions before we get into these topics, if that's okay. One is, and sheds made me think about this question, and also the fact that Amazon is now selling tiny homes, and other vendors as well. Are we prepared to deal with potential for pre-manufactured housing, which may help to reduce the cost of this to people who want to implement them? I know for sheds, people who were buying pre-made sheds had trouble getting through our system, so I just wanted to raise the point. And you don't have to answer now if you want time to think about it. Just wanted to put that out there.
And I would just respond, I think the key point is that whatever plans would be submitted to the city would have to meet our building code, whether they are pre-manufactured or not. So that's something that we should look at so that we're sure that we can accept those types of plans for these types of units.
I just wonder if it's possible for staff to dig around or just look to see, just to be familiar, because it is being advertised and it is a way to get them done more cheaply. Just to know, do our homework on what may be coming our way. Any comments or questions on that? Okay. The other piece, and this is not needing to be fully discussed tonight, I just wanted to raise it. I know that there was discussion on implementation plan and that you needed time on that. I just wanted to make sure that we are ready. And I also know that from going to many discussions on ADUs with other municipalities, the ability to have some sort of technical assistance was described as something that would help people maneuver this, and it's been a challenge with implementation in other jurisdictions. So I don't know if we have that built into the implementation plan, but I wanted to ask the question to see if it could be.
I think education is going to be very important for those applicants who want to take advantage of the text amendment. So we absolutely will be putting out information proactively and also have it available for folks who want to meet with staff and discuss.
Okay. And my last broad question is stormwater management. I think that's not just related to ADUs, but just everything, because I know flooding is something the entire state of Maryland is dealing with, as other jurisdictions as we deal with climate change. But you don't need to go into detail, but just that we're thinking about how we're going to be building, generally speaking, so that we're addressing stormwater management for the future.
And that's certainly part of the mix when a permit would come in.
Okay, thank you. All right. So let's move to the first topic, which is addresses. And so at this time, we do know that within Rockville, there are divisions of property that have the same address, but sometimes have a half or an AB. So would we, if they were to come into compliance, have to change that?
And I think we do need to have more discussion with the Postal Service to make sure that those folks would get mail. And you're correct. We know there are several half addresses. Actually, some of them are single-family homes that, for whatever reason, the address assignments were not made correctly or didn't anticipate a lot being created. So I'm hoping that there is a way to work with the Postal Service and still have the same street address, but perhaps look at a Unit A and a Unit B. I know when I personally lived in an ADU, that's what it was. So I'm hopeful that that's a potential solution here.
Thank you. And I think it just also helps with, you know, if someone is making an address or addressing someone, that it's clear who it's going to, and it just helps, I think, the potential person who's living there or tenant. So I certainly am in favor of allowing people to maintain that. Councilmember Fulton and Councilmember Shaw, and then I see Councilmember Van Grack.
I think I'm a little confused on this one because we've had the conversation about it, and I think there's general agreement that we want there to be a way to distinguish, and there's a difficulty with the post office. But then I come back to, why are we making it a requirement then? Like, what happens if we pull that requirement out? What is the outcome of that? Doesn't the situation we're dealing with just resolve? What does having the requirement add?
From what I can tell, and this is a requirement that dates when we did require special exceptions for ADUs. It's in the county ordinance for their ADUs, and I think it was just a way of kind of having a maintaining of single-family residential neighborhoods so that there weren't kind of more apartment-style addresses, even though the reality is they exist.
But we just said we wanted those, right? Like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But what I'm trying to explore is if the requirement wasn't there, we took it out, the impact would be, presumably if the post office allows them, that there would be A's or B's, right?
Yeah, we would work with them and assign the addresses accordingly.
So if I'm understanding correctly, the requirement does nothing to meet our goals as stated. Question mark for everybody else. But if I'm missing something, we should take an unnecessary requirement out of the ordinance.
And just based on some of our discussions we've had internally, we would have no issue with that.
Thank you, and I'll just clarify, it's the address of the home is the same, but it has a modifier, so.
Yes.
It's maybe interpretation on what you mean by that, so, but I just know that last time we discussed this from what I heard, and maybe we'll do a straw poll, that many of us like the opportunity to have a modifier. Councilmember Shaw.
I just wanted to share a bit more from my perspective of why I brought up this issue. I think it is important for a tenant, particularly if you are having issues with your landlord and you send something to the city, or you want to make some report, or if there's business in terms of an inspection, just to have that difference in address. Because I think that is part of a way to protect a tenant, and I just wanted to share, just so folks can have more understanding on that.
I agree, and that's what I shared as well. I totally agree.
And I just want to clarify that I agree. I agree with the language as drafted, with the exception of that we'd have to adjust the numbering. I agree with Councilmember Fulton's concern about the use of the term character, because that could be defined different ways. And I also would have no problem eliminating the requirement with regard to the main dwelling unit must remain with the same number as any accessory dwelling unit, for the reasons that my colleagues just said.
Okay, so staff, is there any other question that you have about this one item as it relates to ADUs? So the house number is the same, but we would allow a modifier. Can I just make sure that?
That's not my proposal. My proposal is we remove that requirement entirely from the ordinance because I do not see what it adds. That's my proposal.
And we
Okay.
would be fine with that.
Okay, but there's not a possibility that someone would pick a random number on the block, right? That's what I just was trying to read as to why you may have kept it in there. Because there are some blocks, like mine, that the numbers jump all over the place.
That is true. And I think you're probably
And
correct.
skips numbers. So they couldn't pull from a number, I don't know, like if there's missing a 538, they wouldn't say, okay, I'm going to make that house 538. Councilmember Van Grack, did you have a question
I was
about
going
that?
to say, because that's a property law issue with regard to a specific lot and having a number. So the modifier could be added,
That's
but if
what
you're
I'm-
actually, I think it's a property law issue that we
That's right.
couldn't change as a body, because I think it's under state common law. Correct.
So maybe it's more of a technical assistance education if someone is selecting the modifier. Now, would staff provide the modifier, or people get to choose? Like, just to clarify, as you think that through.
I mean, typically we, as staff, assign addresses.
Okay.
So we can do that through the process.
And we can do that with removing this requirement, or do you need anything in there to state that staff will issue the address?
I think we can do that through the process.
Okay, great. So I think let's just do a straw poll on this one. I think many of us have already opined for a variety of reasons. All right, let's go. Who is in favor of removing so that we can allow modifiers? Okay. I don't think there's, I think it was pretty clear. I would just, as we do the technical assistance document, make sure that process is clear to the person who's building. All right, the next topic is ownership, and the idea, I believe, there was a discussion about whether the owner has to be on the property, on one of the units, of either the main property or the ADU. My question on that one is, and you were thinking about just eliminating that altogether, because there's another place where in our code where it's required. Can you please explain that to us?
I think the issue that we see is that there's only one rental license that's allowed per address. So someone couldn't rent out both the main dwelling and the ADU under our code, not the zoning code, but the landlord-tenant code. And so we felt that this was somewhat superfluous, given that reality, and also the fact, the way it's written, it indicates that the owner, it has to be the primary residence of the owner, and that's not something that the city really gets into, whether their primary residence is here or anywhere else. So that's something that I think that we would actually recommend be removed from this code, because it's just not something that we can prove necessarily.
Thank you. I have two questions regarding this. One is, are you expecting people to read other parts of our code to know what they can and cannot do, or will there be a cross-reference?
If they're renting the ADU or their main dwelling, they should read the landlord-tenant code, because the leases have to comply with it.
So there are people who rent without licenses. It happens a lot. There's no current scanning. I do think that there needs to be something that tells people what the rules are and not expect them to run through all of our code. It's complicated. Councilman Van Grack, I see you have a comment, but go ahead.
I was just saying I agree with you, and I don't see a need to remove it. I don't know that it's superfluous, and it might be, but it's a clarification point. So.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on this? Councilman Fulton, Councilman Valeri after Councilman Fulton.
I just heard two things. I fully understand we shouldn't have things in our code that we can't enforce. And something in there that says the owner must occupy for 12, we'll never know that. So like, I see your point. I heard the mayor ask for some sort of cross-reference or some way in this part of knowing, which is different from what I heard my colleagues say about leave it as is. So I like the middle ground option, not the leave as is, because that's just an unenforceable thing in our code.
One clarification on the unenforceable, and then Councilman Valeri, sorry. So during, this is going to bring a whole nother can of worms, but during short-term rental discussion, there was an idea with the city that at some point we would be getting a technology to help us. Now I know we're holding on the short-term rentals at this time, but the issue of unauthorized rentals is a thing. So is the city going to proceed on getting that kind of thing so that when unauthorized rentals happen, the city has the scanner?
Yes. In fact, we've talked with several companies that provide that service, and we've asked that very question.
Okay, so there will be some level of enforceability because you'll see things pop up. I just want to flag that.
The language here is the owner must occupy. Whatever it is you're talking about won't address that. It will address whether it's rented twice.
So no, my comment is if there is a rental happening in the ADU and someone does an unauthorized rental on the main property, that it would pop up in the scanners. So then they would be able to see that it's an unauthorized rental. That's all, okay. Some level of enforceability. Councilmember Valeri.
this is the challenge, right? I am in favor of removing the owner must live on the property for a variety of reasons, mostly to allow the maximum flexibility for individuals, especially for seniors that may want to either rent out an ADU or frankly rent out the main housing and live in the ADU. On top of the other lack of enforceability, I also think, frankly, that this, again, this is like a looming scary figure and less of an actual issue because, again, when you parse through what a lot of people's concerns are, it is about, an unlicensed rental unit or it is something else. It is not necessarily intrinsic to this issue, but is more broadly a housing issue. So, but going back to Councilmember Fulton, ultimately at the end of the day, are we going to start defining, yes, you are primary when maybe you have a second home somewhere in New England and you spend X number of months there. I don't want to get into that. It's up to everybody's deal. So I'm in favor of removing that.
Thank you. Colleagues, any other comments or questions on this? So I think we need to then opine from those who haven't spoken about whether you would like the clarification added. It could be done in two ways, whether it is cross-referenced or kept as is by staff. Dr. Miles? Or removed entirely. Yeah, you have to weigh in on one of those three options, please.
Got it. Not whether people should be on site. Okay, I'm okay with staff's recommendation as is.
Okay, so staff's recommendation is to remove it entirely. Okay. Councilman Van Grack.
Could you just clarify what your clarification is?
Yes, so.
Because I'm still
Sorry.
not sure what the clarification is.
So one is remove entirely, which means that there's no reference to the need to have the primary residence. Although, even if you remove entirely, it's still another part of the code on rental licenses. But it's not cross-referenced, so you're expecting people to read the code and know that. So that is a challenge for people who are not scanning all of our code, perhaps, but could be addressed in other ways. The second is, go ahead, I see you have a comment there.
I was just saying we could build that into this ordinance generally. So that there is a cross-reference to the landlord-tenant ordinance.
Yeah, that was my initial comment, is that there be a cross-reference
To the rental.
to the rental piece so that people know to look at it. That was my suggestion to start, but.
I support that.
Councilman Van Grack supports that. Who else wants to weigh in on this? Dr. Miles, you support that approach? Councilman Fulton supports. Larry supports. Did you have a comment or are you supporting?
No, I'm supporting.
Okay. All right, so we are clear on that now. We are going to move forward with staff's recommendation, but include a cross-reference so that folks know to look. All right, and then in the educational materials, we will be clear about that. Are we good? All right, we're getting there, guys. Great. All right, so that was number 2. Number 3 is compliance. So this would provide a grace period of up to 12 months upon adoption for non-compliant units to be brought into compliance or grandfathered into compliance. And we would look at, are you saying investigate or are you proposing to waive the fees? I just want to make sure we understand what investigate means.
We would propose waiving the fees.
Perfect. To clarify, we would waive the fee so that people can bring these under compliance. All right, so how would you know who's not in compliant? How many non-compliant ADUs are there in the city? Do we have any idea?
We really don't. I mean, it's complaint driven, and we would certainly undertake education and outreach. So if folks know that they have one, they would know that they also have the grace period to look at these things.
Okay, so you'd be like looking at Rockville reports and other methods to educate the public that there's a new ordinance and they have to come in compliance. The challenge is there are some ADUs, because I have several on my community, I'll just note on my block even, that have been around for years and years and years. And some of them are very, very old, maybe even historic. So I just want to make sure we're not, it may be physically impossible to get in compliance with some of the guidance. So can you just explain that further?
And I think one of the issues that we raised is whether there is a non-compliant accessory building. We've changed our accessory building regulations a number of times over the years.
Right.
That doesn't count against the folks who want to put an ADU within that, what is now a non-compliant accessory building.
Thank you. And anyone who went through this special exception process and may have that kind of breezeway or whatever it is, we would consider them to be compliant.
We addressed that in the prior ADU ordinance, but we could put similar language in this one, working with the city attorney's office.
Okay, like if they want to remove the extensive breezeway, for example, that's an example of someone who's gone through a process already but shouldn't be penalized, I think, in my opinion. Councilman Valeri.
I vaguely recall from previous planning commission meeting, if I recall correctly, that there was also a consideration, the incentive program side of it. So the less stick and more carrot, and to encourage people to bring it into compliance. Is that something that is feasible to do? And additionally, what are we looking at as far in general staffing needs to be able to do anything around non-compliant units that are out there?
Well, I think by virtue of the fact that we wouldn't be charging fees, I mean, normally if a violation comes in, there's an investigation fee, and fees that for the applications that need to be filed to make the unit compliant. So I think waiving the fees is a great start to provide that carrot for folks that have these units, and certainly a 12-month grace period is as well.
Thank you, Jim.
I think the 12-month grace period works if we really get busy on education, though, because if we don't tell anybody, then they come in the 15th month. Not quite fair. So I just want to make sure that we're building in education as soon as possible is when this hits. Okay.
We will do that.
Any other comments on this? Are you all okay with staff's recommendation, straw poll? Okay. Do you have any other clarifying questions on that for us? Okay. To go back to the software that you're going to be employing just for rentals in general, are you planning to do that this fiscal year, or are you proposing in the next budget? Or maybe you need to talk to the city manager about that.
I think it's in the current budget.
Okay.
So it would carry over into at least as a proposal into the next budget.
Okay, so sometime this fiscal year we'll get that up and running. Okay. I just want the listening public to be aware as well. All right. So the next item relates to parking. So when you first introduced this, there was a requirement for 2 and none near Metro. Can you just clarify what was and what you're proposing?
So the original amendment required that there be 2 spaces on the lot. Not that there are 2 spaces required for the ADU, but there are 2 spaces on the lot, which is the requirement for a single-family home. Recognizing that there are many homes in the city that do not have those. That is outside of the delineated metro area in the comp plan, which is the 7/10 of a mile walking distance. Within that 7/10 of a mile, the requirement was for 1 space to be located on the lot. Not an additional space, but just 1 space on the lot. And there is also a provision that an applicant could request that there be no parking required, and that the chief of zoning could grant essentially a waiver from the parking requirement if it was demonstrated that it would not exacerbate current parking situation. So what's happened when it was going forward through the Planning Commission, there was a lot of research done that indicated, particularly in Montgomery County, how many additional cars per ADU were being added. And it turned out that on average there was about 0.4 cars added to a residential dwelling unit when there was an ADU present. So that kind of led to our consideration that there should not be any parking at all, given that there is on-street parking, and certainly an owner could add parking if they so choose. So we felt, based on that research and research of many other jurisdictions that have implemented this, that there could be no parking required for a detached ADU. I will say that we had the same requirement for attached ADUs, and that is not what the requirement is. So it's the prior mayor and council actually went back a little bit back toward the original proposal, but did not require additional off-street parking for ADUs that are within the initial envelope of the main dwelling. But if there was an addition to the main dwelling as an ADU, then the original parking requirements, the two per lot outside of a metro area and one within. So that's how the attached ADU parking requirements are in the code currently. But we still have the same recommendation that we feel that no parking for detached ADUs is the way to go based on the research and experience that we have.
I have one question. If someone there are some properties, as you noted, that don't have a driveway, for example. Those properties, whether they're attached or not, would not be penalized? Or can you explain how you would handle that because they don't physically have space?
Well, under our recommendation, there's no additional parking spaces that are required for a unit like that, then they would just be permitted to have the ADU without the parking.
But under the attached ADUs, how would you handle that if they don't have space?
They could, depending on where they are in the city, if they're within or without the metro area, or they could request a waiver from the chief of zoning if it can be demonstrated that there's sufficient on-street parking.
And is there an additional fee for that?
No.
Okay, so they can request a waiver without a fee?
That would be part of their application process.
Part of their application process. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Colleagues, Councilmember Valeri?
So just to be clear, it would be happening concurrently with the application, excuse me, the asking for a waiver would happen concurrently with the application process, so it wouldn't be an additional delay.
Correct.
Okay. And so for this requirement, the off-street parking requirement, because I do live in one of those homes where half of our car basically fits in our little driveway, that would very much affect us. And in general, off-street parking issues are off-street parking issues no matter what. And again, I think sometimes ADUs have been scapegoated when they're not necessarily the root cause of the issue. I am very much in support of the off-street parking requirement being eliminated. And I will end there and defer to my council member colleague.
Councilmember Fulton and Dr. Miles, did you have something to add after that? Okay. All right. Councilmember Fulton and then Dr. Miles.
No, I'll just go on record. I support staff's recommendation, which is also Planning Commission's recommendation, which is also the result of extensive research on the issue, to remove any additional parking requirements for detached ADUs.
Dr. Miles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I may have spoken at a previous mayor and council meeting on this. While, at least in my head, it would seem counterintuitive to eliminate the parking requirement, I'll listen to the people, both Planning Commission as well as the communities, Lincoln Park, East Rockville, and Twinbrook, who have opined and support elimination.
Thank you. Can I ask a question? Just since my colleague raised it and shared it previously, what happens in neighborhoods that have tight parking? Because I have heard from some folks in East Rockville, for example, that they currently have, in some parts, not all, but limited parking and already fight about it. So how would you handle that? They just have to figure it out?
Right, if there's no parking that's required, if that's what's adopted for detached ADUs, then there's, they don't have to provide any additional parking, and, if the tenant has a car, then they'll be parking it on the street or in some other location.
Thank you. Councilmember Jackson, do I see your hand?
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to associate myself with my colleagues who have already spoken, and I support the staff's recommendation for doing away with the off-street parking requirement.
Councilmember Van Grack and then Councilmember Shaw.
I support the staff's recommendation, and I'm prepared to go forward as recommended.
I also support staff's recommendation.
Thank you. I think that is pretty clear. I do just want to have staff as part of education and neighborhood conflict mitigation in areas where there are parking issues, to take a sensitive and educational approach to it, because I do know that is one of the big areas that people fight about all the time is parking, even though it's on public spaces. Thank you. All right, so the next area of discussion is compatibility. Can you please speak to this again?
So the draft ordinance is fairly specific in terms of what is deemed to be consistent or compatible with the community. And there was a reason for that. As we were drafting this, there were certainly some neighborhood concerns, particularly about compatibility. But I think a lot of those concerns have been alleviated, and particularly with the fact that new neighborhoods are getting design guidelines, and we have new standards for accessory buildings themselves, which we didn't really have prior to this code amendment, that I think this issue is maybe not as significant as it was before. So I think Councilmember Fulton had a good point about it being consistent with the appearance, but maybe eliminating all the other things that talking about similar facade treatment and window styles, et cetera, which are extremely specific. And but I think it would still get at the general intent of this provision.
Thank you. And if someone, for example, were to say compatible and you're taking out the specifics, that would allow them to, say, buy something from Amazon and maybe paint it the same color, or have some, do things to make it compatible with the main unit, but they may not have the same, like, rectangle versus square windows. I'm just making something up, but.
Exactly.
Okay, all right. Councilmember Fulton.
By the way, I love how methodically we're getting through this. Thank you, Mayor. To help that along, maybe I'll suggest that there's three options. One is language as is. Two is change to must be compatible with the appearance, period. Option three is to remove it entirely and rely on design guidelines and everything you just said about standards and like setbacks and all of the like. So there might be three options.
I'm fine with that. I will note that most neighborhoods don't have design guidelines, and we're not necessarily encouraging every neighborhood to have design guidelines. So I am fine with the word compatibility staying in, but, as staff suggested, removing the other stuff. Councilmember Valeri.
I keep bringing up previous planning commission meetings, but, there was some good stuff in there, and I paid attention. It's interesting because going back to branding super quickly, and I said something to the council member, freedom is one of the things that people most value about Rockville. So I find it slightly at odds that for a neighborhood that does not have a particular guideline, that we would want to be subjective about what is or is not compatibility. for that reason, and for, frankly, some other reasons, like, one person's treasure is another person's trash. I don't want to make those sort of judgment calls, so I would want to remove the language completely. Always open to working with my colleagues and finding compromise, but ultimately, this is like the mix between, being very subjective about what is compatible, and then what ultimately is a reason that someone might move to a neighborhood that does not have guidelines, because they do like the different freedom that brings.
Thank you. We'll move down the line. So the options are remove, just so you're clear, have compatible but not be, and then compatible being broad, and then the other option is the more specific character, appearance, et cetera, language. So, Councilman Van Grack.
I'm going to stick with what I had said before with Councilmember Fulton's initial discussion about having some type of appearance, but when we're getting into incorporating exact compatible materials, I think we're getting too exacting in requirement, which could be limiting, especially in a lower income situation. By the same vein, I think having some consistency with the appearance when you have a neighborhood and potential alterations is reasonable. So I think I support the middle ground.
So that's option 2. All right, and I have one remove, one option 2. Councilmember Jackson, were you raising your hand?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I don't want to prolong this conversation, so I like option 2. I don't want to be too prescriptive, but I do agree with Councilmember Van Grack that neighborhoods do have character, and we want to retain that character. I understand Councilmember Valeri's argument, but the same token, when you have a property and you've kept up your property, and the neighbors do something, that affects you as well. So I'm for the middle ground, as you've so well laid it out, Mayor.
Thank you. So I didn't count myself in that. But to clarify, so now we're at 3, but to clarify, middle ground does not use the word character, but more compatibility. Okay, all right. Third option includes character. Councilmember.
I have a question. Yes. I would be interested to know, out of these 3 options, if there's someone that has less resources, which option would be easiest for them to remove?
Yeah, because if you, let's say you got a prefab, right, you may not have to paint it. You can just keep it whatever. So like, for example, on Amazon, there are like these log cabin looking ones that are coming through. If it's compatible, then you would maybe align the color with the main dwelling. If it's not, I'm making it up. Mr. Wassilick, please clarify. You would just plop it in as is.
Remove.
Okay, so. All right. Dr. Miles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I associate myself with Councilmember Fulton. Just remove it in a larger context for a conversation we'll have on housing more broadly. There are several ways that we can help address housing affordability, and one of which I think we spoke about at the retreat is to minimize regulations to the extent that they keep people safe and allow us to reach our goals. And I think that's why that is my rationale for supporting the removal. Again, so long as things are safe, and this certainly seems that it's something that is safe.
Mr. Wassilick, did you have anything to add? I saw you motion. Okay, all right. So, Councilman Fulton, where are you?
Remove.
Okay, so we have 4 for remove. And so that means that it could be any color, doesn't match the main dwelling.
Unless there's design guidelines.
Unless a neighborhood has design guidelines, which right now, 1 does.
One's in progress.
And 1's in progress. Right, okay. Councilmember Shaw.
And this is just the aesthetics, right? Just, okay.
Yeah, like, so I said there could be totally different colors, doesn't have to have the same necessary. For example, the things that could, like the color could be totally different. It could have a square roof versus a pitched roof. Any other possibilities you all want to mention?
Unless there are architectural guidelines for a particular neighborhood.
Any form, any shape, any color. That's what this, okay. Councilmember Fulton, then Councilmember Larry.
Sorry, I just might want to see if I'm answering Councilmember Shaw's. Yes, it is just aesthetics. Dr. Miles said, safety concerns, lot coverage concerns, that like all of those are the same. It's just the aesthetics that we would be removing.
Yeah. And the height thing is not a part of this discussion. Yeah. Councilmember Valeri.
I do want to emphasize the affordability aspect of it, because sometimes our materials just aren't available, but also to just in good fun to Councilmember Jackson, sometimes not having a particular look is the character of the neighborhood, and I think that this keeps it open to all those possibilities.
All right, so we have one more topic. I see that do you want to add anything, or you have any comments?
No, I just wanted to say we kind of have to think about kind of the worst case scenarios for what someone might want to put in their backyard. And we know that when people look at containers, shipping containers and things like that, which may not be compatible with the neighborhood, but as long as they met the building code and could be installed, then that would be permitted. So I just wanted to.
So can you elaborate on that a bit more? So would they would have to have windows, right?
Yes.
Okay. But anyway, does that change anyone's view on those who voted for it? You're okay with containers? Okay. All right. Thank you for clarifying, and I hope we get to see what comes through. All right. The next piece, I think is the last, was affordability. Councilmember Shaw.
So in the briefing book, it talked about that ADUs would provide more affordable housing. So I wanted to know, how are we determining that they'll be more affordable? Is there any data on that? And specifically, how we define affordability is 30% or less of a person's income. So how are we defining affordability?
In terms of this text amendment, it really does not define it. These will probably be more responsive to the market. So if someone is renting out their ADU, they'll price it as they see fit. So, of course, they'll be subject to any other requirements that the city has, but this particular ordinance does not really address affordability. Just anecdotally, typically those units, they have less amenities than apartment complexes, and so are typically priced accordingly, but not necessarily.
I have a comment after that. Go ahead.
Because the majority of market-based housing is actually unaffordable for renters. So I just wanted to add that point, because we specifically say that this will provide more affordable housing. So I did just want to have more information around that. So thank you.
I want to speak to this because I actually know several people who have done this, and actually was with someone this weekend who did do something to make their lot more affordable. For example, there was a single woman who lost her job, and she did use part of her lot to rent out to somebody, so it made it more affordable to her so that she didn't have to move. So that's one example of affordability. Another example of affordability are sometimes people have seniors, parents, someone in their community that they need to take care of. Having someone live with you is much more affordable than maybe an institutional care situation. Third, sometimes folks who have built multifamily, their cost per square foot for building, because they're going up so high with steel, that cost of housing is much more expensive than something that is stick-built. And so rent prices could be lower. So I just wanted to note some examples. And then the other one is I've seen in our community people who have children with different abilities that age and grow up. They may not be able to live fully on their own, but on their property. And so that is a more affordable, kind of independent but supportive environment. So I just wanted to share some examples of ones that I've seen that have been allowing affordability. And then, seniors as well who have fixed incomes who rent out a part of that property have an opportunity as their incomes are flat sometimes. Councilmember Valeri.
So going back on the affordability piece as well, with often going out on disability, having that benefit, very too often individuals with that level of fixed income, there is minimal options available. So that's one thing. But overall, if we eliminate every opportunity to have infill housing, if we don't encourage more infill housing options, then we cannot expand supply, which then leads to overall affordability. So it has to be, there is no one magic bullet, as much as, and I don't like using that phrase, but I just used it. But it's everything on the menu and not just a single thing. So ADUs in and of themselves are not going to save the affordable housing crisis, but is one of the arrows in our quiver.
Thank you. Councilmember Shaw.
I do appreciate that exclamation, that those examples. I think some of them are pretty unique, and I think these are good examples of accessible housing. But I was particularly talking about cost, and I know one of the examples did help the landlord and the owner, but I was specifically talking about the renters. But from what I understand, again, there's no limit on costs, right? So I think folks can charge as much as they want. And it is based on market-based housing. So I do think that when you're saying that it's more affordable, that's based off of the discretion of the landlord and how much they want to charge.
Thank you. I did give some examples of when the tenant benefits as well. And also noting that there are some luxury multifamily units coming out in Rockville that because of those amenities can charge more, and by the market would not be able to charge necessarily that same amount. So there are a lot of ways to get at it, but I appreciate the spirit of the discussion and all of my colleagues' perspectives. Any other comments? Okay. Is there anything else that you need from us on this topic?
We did have one subject that we wanted to make sure that you are all okay with, and that is this provision that Megan talked about earlier, in that we want to both allow for so-called tiny houses or units that are smaller, but also allow for folks that may have a small main dwelling, and the ADUs are based on a percentage of the size of the main dwelling, but there's also a floor for those that have small main dwellings of 400 square feet, which we think is a reasonable sized unit. So we just want to make sure that all of these things, which we would incorporate into the ordinance, that you are okay with.
So I do support personally, the body will weigh in, the ability to leverage a tiny home in the space. I also appreciated your comment that if something is below the 400 and they are trying to convert, that you would have a mechanism to do that. My one question is, are you asking if it's okay to build a large unit that's much bigger than the main dwelling? Just for clarification.
No, we still.
Okay. Because I've seen that too. That exists.
And the way the code is written,
yeah,
it could only be 50% of the footprint of the main dwelling.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Colleagues, you okay with what he said? Okay. I'm seeing shaking heads or thumbs up. Okay. Thank you very much. I just wanted to, sorry to raise this, but just for ease on our code, I would think that you need to have similar requirements for attached versus detached. So I just wanted to understand what's the process to align them, because now we'll have totally different pieces that will not make sense to the public.
We do have the zoning ordinance rewrite coming up, so we could fix it in that process.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, are you okay with that? All right. I didn't mean to open up another can, but. All right, thank you. I'm hearing from my colleagues that a break is needed. So I will just say, please be back here by no later than 10:05. We'll be starting by 10. Welcome back, Rockville. We took a quick break and we're going to reconvene meeting number 18-24. We're moving on to agenda item 11D, discussion and instruction on project plan application PJT 2023-00016, an amendment to the plan development for Champion Billiards to permit construction of a 4,400 square foot commercial building at 900 Rockville Pike in the planned development Champion Billiards Zone. J. Danchis, applicant. Introduction and possible adoption. Welcome, staff.
Good evening. My name is Camila Zulfigurian. I am with the Department of Community Planning and Development Services. This is project plan application PJT 2023-00016, Danchis Center on the Pike at 900 Rockville Pike. The subject property is located in Planning Area 9, Rockville Pike. As noted, the address is 900 Rockville Pike. The land area of the property is 0.44 acres after right-of-way dedication. The land use designation is office, commercial, and residential mix, and the zoning district is planned development Champion Billiards with the MXCD equivalent zone. The applicant is requesting to amend the Champion Billiards plan development to reduce the size of the commercial building and revise the site layout. Staff recommends approval with conditions. The proposed site area for Danchis Center on the Pike, as noted, will be 0.44 acres. The proposed retail will be 4,400 square feet. The build-to line increased from 85 feet to 92 feet. It will accommodate an 8-foot wide bicycle path and a 7-foot wide pedestrian walkway, and it will also accommodate future BRT alignment along Rockville Pike. Access to the subject property is provided through a recorded 25-foot wide public access easement to the south of the property. And with that, we arrive at the finding and recommendations. The project plan is not in conflict with the Rockville 2040 plan or Rockville Pike plan and does not adversely affect the health or safety of the public. The proposal has been evaluated and has been found to comply with the APFS requirements and zoning ordinance. On January 10th, the Planning Commission recommended approval of this application, subject to the findings and conditions in the staff report, also subject to further consideration of the proposed truck turning movements. The applicant subsequently provided exhibits showing that an SU, single unit, 30-foot long single unit vehicle truck can safely access the site from multiple driveways along Rockville Pike. Staff recommends approval of project plan PJT 2023-00016, a proposed amendment to the Champion Billiards Plan development with conditions noted in the report. For Mayor and Council action is to provide direction to staff to assist in drafting a resolution for consideration at a future meeting. Are there any items of concern regarding the plan that have not been addressed? And also, are you supportive of drafting a resolution to approve the plan with staff's conditions? And that concludes the presentation for Danchi Center on the Pike. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this presentation. I just wanted to clarify, if we have questions for the applicant, are they able to speak?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay. Just want to open the floor. Dr. Miles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I join you in thanking staff for the presentation. And I apologize to staff for not getting this question that just dawned to you sooner. And if you need to come back separately at a separate time, it's okay too. The question I have is the 7-foot pedestrian trail, 8-foot bicycle pathway. Are those shared or are they separate? So it's 15 feet total, or is it shared?
So they will be separate but adjacent to each other.
Great, thanks so much. That's easy.
Thank you. I know this came before Mayor and Council in the past, and the discussion on aligning with BRT as well as making sure there was pedestrian and bike pathways in accordance with Rockville's Pike Plan, I think was done. I know it went to a couple of RPAC, RBAC, and the Transportation and Mobility Commission. I wanted to acknowledge that phase in the process, and I think it helped improve, at least in terms of our goals for pedestrian safety. I do know that intersection is one that we often hear about issues relating to pedestrian safety. So I think this will help to improve pedestrian safety. The other topic I wanted to raise, just for clarity, it is my understanding that staff has shared, because I've asked it, that the issue about the easement as well as crossing the property to get into from 1010 area to 900 has been adjudicated by a court of law. Can you please clarify that and confirm?
That is correct. So the findings that relate to the public access easement and its purpose of providing access to that property have been reviewed, and further questions regarding the legal aspects can be answered by the city attorney's office as well. But for staff perspective, they have been reviewed, and the access is sufficient in that way.
Thank you. Is there anything else the city attorney's office would like to add?
Mr. Dumais is on the line. Would you like to weigh in, Nick, or?
Sure, Madam Mayor, can you hear me?
Yes.
So it's important to note that the approval of the use permit for the Champion Billiards site was appealed by the property owner to the south in, I believe, sometime before 2009. And that appeal went to the Montgomery County Circuit Court and subsequently to the Court of Special Appeals. And in 2009, the Court of Special Appeals issued its ruling on that appeal. One of the issues in that appeal had to do with the fundamental question of whether the property at 900 Rockville Pike could utilize the 25-foot access easement across the Edmondson property for access. And the court determined in no uncertain terms that yes, it could, and that the access easement that was granted in 1971 was intended in part for the express purpose of allowing public access across the Edmondson property and to and into 900 Rockville Pike. All that said, the new question of whether there is a strip of private property separating the SHA right-of-way at the northernmost curb cut on the Edmonston property, the property to the south, from the 25-foot access point, has never been adjudicated by a court of law. That was not raised as an issue back in the 2009 appeal. So that is a new legal issue, again, that has not been adjudicated by court. That said, staff's analysis, which of course the mayor and council can choose to accept or not, essentially is that the primary access to 900 Rockville Pike is via the 25-foot access easement, and there are several different curb cuts along Maryland Route 355 into the Edmondson property that would allow safe and adequate access for pedestrians, vehicles, and of course trucks up to the 30-foot size to access 900 Rockville Pike. So it's a long way of saying, although this new issue of this small strip of private property has not been adjudicated by court, the staff's analysis, if accepted by the mayor and council, would allow the mayor and council to move forward with a decision on this project plan without interpreting the easement and trying to adjudicate that question.
Thank you. That issue came up during the previous mayor and council, and I wanted to make sure to recall the history on that, so thank you. I have then 3 subsequent questions related to this specific topic. One is the property, the 1010 property, would lose 4 parking spaces, is that correct?
Approximately. There are currently parking spaces where the public access easement would provide access to 900 Rockville Pike.
Okay, so a City of Rockville question is, if that property were to redevelop, how could we not negatively impact the redevelopment potential of that property? One idea is that we would reduce the parking requirement for whatever redevelopment so that they are not losing any ability to manage that property in the future. Could we do that?
So at this time, since the subject property being reviewed is 900 Rockville, we can't make, projections for what could happen for future development for that site. However, there have been options for changing the number of parking requirements for various properties along Rockville Pike in the MXCD zone. So there are options for reducing the parking requirements once the future development comes in.
I just wanted to get on record, and I don't know where my colleagues stand on this, that we're trying to do no harm on both sides. So that would be the intent, potentially, if others agree, would be to allow that property to be redeveloped. If it decides to do that, we don't know what are in the plans, but we wouldn't negatively harm it by then requiring 4 additional parking spaces that they cannot comply with. So my colleagues, are you okay with this point? Okay, unanimous. Okay, all right, thank you. The next related comment on this is I've read this staff report multiple times, and I've had some time to look at it. There was a comment about, from the neighboring property, that they would have to be in charge of saying, are trucks larger than SU 30 permitted, and having to report that. If this is approved, could there just be signage that provides clarification so that trucks know that they can't come in there? And I've seen that signage in highways and places where there are bridges, just so that trucks may not know as they're making a delivery or construction that what is allowed and what's not allowed. Could that be signage put there?
So currently with the project plan, there's a condition that generally addresses to enforce, the size of the trucks that would be coming into the property, and with the subsequent site plan application, we could introduce a condition that it requires a sign that limits the size of the trucks that enter the property.
Okay, so, and that would help allow this project to move forward, as well as address the concern of the neighboring property.
Correct.
And that signage could potentially go on the property or make it visible from 900. Would that be a problem for you all? Okay, thank you. Colleagues, are you okay with that signage? Okay, agreed. Thank you. The last comment is, and I've raised this during the briefing, I know staff was looking into it, a public access easement plus the strip of private property that has to be crossed. Inevitably, sometimes things happen. And I have seen when projects are being developed that sometimes there's damage. So if damage were to occur, how do we handle that? And maybe the applicant would say, we would help repair. But I just want to think, I always think of worst case scenario and how do you plan for scenarios 1, 2, and 3. Is there anything that would stipulate that right now, or where would that maintenance fall under?
So at this time, along with the purpose of the public access easement, which exists along Rockville Pike, it is the property owner on which the public access easement exists responsibility to maintain. So if it's occurring within that easement, it is the responsibility of the property owner. So in this scenario, it would be the property owner to the south at 1010 Rockville Pike, and that is the extent of the information and the template that exists for the rest of the properties over there.
So if anything happens under construction, then 1010 will be responsible for repair.
At this time, correct. I'm not. There isn't further detail on restrictions or guidelines for construction, but there are general requirements within the city that would limit impact onto adjacent properties when construction occurs.
Thank you. Councilmember Van Grack.
Just to clarify, even though the easement owner and the property owner is responsible for things, if it's damaged by another party, such as the neighboring owner, there still is there's liability from a civil context.
That correct.
Okay.
I will defer to John Foreman for more expansion on that topic.
Yeah, I think, and good evening, I'm John Foreman, I'm the Development Services Manager with City of Rockville. We have other staff on the line, so if anybody else, other staff has feedback. In terms of the general maintenance of the easement, as Kimmy described, on a day-to-day routine use basis, that is correct. The property owner is responsible. Now, in a unique situation such as construction, if it happens to be damage, that could be a different situation. I'll say during the site plan, we get into more of those details in terms of the timing of construction and the plans for construction. So we're still at project plan, so it's still early for that. But let me pause there and see if anybody on the line has anything to add from staff's perspective.
Mr. Foreman, yeah, I just wanted to echo Councilmember Van Grack's comments. The easement grants the public the right to use this 25-foot access route. It doesn't grant the public the right to damage the property. And so, of course, if there is damage on the property, the property owner south of 900 Rockville Pike would have the same remedies under the law as anybody whose property was damaged by somebody. So saying that it's that property owner's responsibility to maintain is not the same as saying that they have the obligation to effectively not go after somebody who damages their property.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. And I would assume, and perhaps the applicant would say, like, if there was a damage that occurred during construction, the result of one of your construction-related trucks or work, that you would be a good neighbor and repair.
I think that within reason, absolutely. I do recall about a half a year ago, an 18.
Can you please come to the mic so that we can record this?
Yes, I do recall about a year ago, a 18-wheeler came through the 1010 parcel in that 25-foot easement, and as he was making the turn, he hit the little wall there that says Edmonston Properties and knocked it over. So I contacted the owners and I said, look, the tractor trailer, I've got his tag number, I've got all the information, and basically he hung up on me. So I noticed that at one of his discussions he just said, I'm just going to fix it. So it's my position to make sure if anything happens to the asphalt or to the pavement or anything in that area by any of my construction vehicles, I assume full responsibility for that, and you have my word.
Thank you. That was the last question I had related to this, and I appreciate you going on record to say that. Any other questions, colleagues? Councilmember Valeri.
I don't have a question so much as a comment. I know that it has been a very long road even to get to this point, and that's putting it kindly. But as somebody who often traverses right there, because one of my physicians is on the other side, I am thrilled at the opportunity to see something come in. And, you know, it would have been great to have had offices and other things, but we are where we are, and I'm just grateful to see an investment there, because the surrounding neighbors and community deserve to see an investment there. And that's all. I just wanted to say my piece on that.
Surprised you didn't mention the pedestrian safety improvement.
I could have. I could have gone, and then we would have gone a long way.
That's all right.
I'm looking forward to, an analogous bike path that will then connect to this, because we'll have this beautiful bike path, but nothing continuing southward. So maybe in the future.
That's the goal. All right, colleagues. So I'm seeing no other hands of questions. I'm just doing another scan. Team, can you please move forward on what you need from us tonight?
We need direction to assist in drafting a resolution for consideration at a future meeting.
So I think you've heard where we are and supportive. I think people have gone on record on a number of questions on signage, on making sure that nothing is damaged. Is there anything else you need to? I think we want to see something come back.
I believe that is all we need tonight. We will come back for adoption at a later date.
Colleagues, you agree? Okay, I'm seeing shaking heads. Thumbs up. Mm-hmm. Excellent.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, and I know procedure is different in different instances. We really could use a motion here.
Sure. So let's have, I know this is going to come back for vote, but let's direct staff, just to be ultra clear in our discussion, to come back with a proposed amendment to support the Champion Billiards PD with conditions noted in report and this evening. Okay. Councilman Van Grack.
Accordingly, I hereby move that the staff come back with regard to project plan application PJT 2023-00016 for the staff recommended amendment to the plan development for Champion Billiards to permit construction on a 4,400 square foot commercial building at 900 Rockville Pike in the PDCB plan development Champion Billiards zone.
Do you also support the items we discussed this evening?
Correct. And
as part of that motion?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And add with the changes that the staff and us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I assume you want to second this.
I would. I had just had to put it all straight in my head. Yes, I will be seconding that.
It has been moved and seconded to come back to us for approval with staff's conditions noted in the report as well as what's discussed. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All right. Do you need anything else from us?
All good, thank you.
Okay, and do we have this on the schedule, correct?
Yes, it's scheduled, I believe, for September 30th. Is that correct? Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure we're hearing when this will be fully resolved. So, thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
All right. All right. I feel like we are on cleanup from a lot of other agenda items, but I'm excited about this next one as well. We are going to move to agenda item 11E, introduction and possible adoption of ordinance for TXT 2024-00265, a zoning text amendment to regulate tobacco and vape shops. Mayor and Council of Rockville, applicants. Thank you again. I see more CPDS, Community Planning and Development Services. I want to thank John and Kimya and Nick for your support in the last agenda item, and welcome Jim and Jenny Snap.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. What is before you this evening is an ordinance that would regulate what we are now terming vape and tobacco shops. formerly known as smoke shops. I just wanted to review what is contained within the ordinance. It would include a new use titled tobacco and vape shops that would be added to the ordinance in those areas where retail uses are permitted, and that is in our MX and IL zones. The same shops would be prohibited because they are retail uses in the other zones, the R zones and the RMD zones. The ordinance would prohibit tobacco and vape shop use from the MXNC, MXC, and MXT zones. Those are all of our MX zones that are within or adjacent to residential neighborhoods. And it would also prohibit the tobacco and vape shops from planned developments that have those same zones as equivalent zones. Tobacco and vape shop would be a permitted conditional use within MXCT, MXCD, MXE, MXB, and MXTD zones, as well as the IL zone. The condition is, as you directed on July 8th, that there be a 1,000-foot buffer from public and private schools and active public parks. And so we adjusted the map to illustrate what that would look like, and we included in your packet the overall city map and also a map of each planning area that gets at a little more detail and shows where these would be permitted and not permitted. So, just to explain the map a little bit more, the buffers are shown in gray, and those buffers are around the public parks and the public schools per the ordinance. And the yellow and red are the zones where retail uses are permitted. So red means, of course, stop. They would not be permitted by the zone. On the yellow areas where the buffer intersects or overlays on the yellow areas, they would also be not permitted. So that's how the buffer system works. So as you can see, there are a few areas in the city where these would be permitted, namely the Rockville Pike, southern part of the corridor away from Richard Montgomery High School, pretty much south of that area, and then in the Research Boulevard, Picard Drive area, and some smaller areas along 355. But the majority of the town center and other primarily commercial areas, they would not be permitted because of the buffers that are in place. This is the same map showing the town center planning area. And as you can see, it's pretty much all grayed out, except for the very northern part of the area, which we happen to have a tobacco shop there that exists. And then you can see down southern part on 355 where it starts to be permitted, but most of the town center would not be permitted. And this is the entire Rockville Pike corridor, and you can see that same illustration. And this is the South Lawn industrial area. Again, most of that area it would not be permitted because of the buffers, but there's some certain slivers where they would be. So I want to talk a little bit about the way the code is drafted for existing retailers. We know there are about 10 tobacco and vape shops that exist in the city, and the way the code is written, those would not be considered non-conforming, even though they may be within the buffers that would be enacted. So they would essentially be considered conforming and would be allowed to continue operating and expand, etc. Same thing if a new school or park would be implemented and there was an existing tobacco or vape shop that would be located within a new buffer, those would also be considered conforming. So we're essentially protecting the existing tobacco and vape shops that exist, but restricting anything new to the areas that are either not within the buffer and are in the zones that they would be allowed. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much. I always like to start with some context. So Can you just also clarify, there's a time sensitivity to us making decisions. So can you please expand on that and what our options are?
In fact, the mayor and council had enacted a moratorium on new vape shops at the as they were called at the time, that expires on August 31st. So if the ordinance would be adopted prior to that date, either this evening or at next week's meeting, then that issue would go away. If the ordinance is not adopted this evening, then we would need to come back next week and extend the moratorium ordinance beyond the August 31st date. So we do feel that you have some options this evening. You could discuss the draft ordinance that's before you, make any changes that you would like, and then move through the introduction, waiving layover period, and then adopting. Or if you feel that there is major amendments to be made, or you don't want to proceed with adoption, then we would respond accordingly.
Just to clarify and add one more complicating factor, if for some reason we don't have a supermajority to waive a layover period, then it could still be brought back next week and be adopted.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. I will also I thank staff for making some of the changes that we discussed in terms of changing the buffer, as well as helping to include the original intent of the whole ordinance, which was to look at areas that were adjacent to where children congregate, namely schools. So thank you for also updating and clarifying the map so we could more clearly see where it's allowable and where it isn't. I will also just note I'm okay with the grandfather. Perhaps we can just, as we have the discussion, I think we just need to weigh in on that one as well. Okay. Any other general comments? Councilmember Valeri.
I think generally, my comment, and this is actually applicable to a couple items that were tonight, is that I am always concerned by policy that arises from a particular area within the city, because I don't necessarily see that being a need for a policy. To the extent that this is one of those examples, I don't recall seeing beyond the College Gardens neighborhood and the Woodley Gardens neighborhood hearing from any other communities. Am I correct in that, or did something sneak by that I missed?
No, I believe that is correct. I mean,
okay.
we did provide outreach, but we didn't really didn't hear from other neighborhoods.
Exactly. So I just want to go on record as stating that, much like with ADUs, I'm just not a fan of looking at a citywide policy when there really is just a particular community that feels very strongly about something. And Madam Mayor and I have had this conversation bajillion times by this point, and we just have a different approach, which is kind of the awesome thing about a diverse new council. But I just wanted to state my concerns from a policy perspective, and I will leave it at that.
Thank you, and I appreciate that the policy you're bringing forward to us is not going to just be spot zoning, but is to look at a citywide policy. Thank you. All right, Councilman Van Grack.
I'm just going to say, first of all, staff, thank you for putting this together. I know that we were very exacting in what we were looking for, because we really, as the mayor said, wanted to focus on a direction and distances from certain areas, as opposed to just generally this area looks good, this area looks bad. And I know I completely agree with Councilmember Valeri with that we don't want to necessarily make policy that's to one neighborhood. That being said, what we really heard from people, even though it might have come from one section of Rockville, was that we don't want to have certain vape shops close to where children and minors are going to be. And what you've created for us today really does that. And it really does say, for those areas where there's going to be significant minors, we don't want these types of places there, as opposed to what's been enacted recently, which is we're not going to have any in the city of Rockville. because we do want to allow certain commercial abilities from folks who, and businesses, but we also don't want to harm the existing businesses that exist. So just like Madam Mayor says, I do support the grandfathering. I do like what you did. I think it does accomplish what we're looking for and what a lot of community members are looking for. So I do support what you did, and I want to thank you for the detail, because I know this took a lot of time on a very short notice, because we've got to get this done promptly. So I just want to thank staff, and I appreciate the work that was done.
Thank you. Councilmember Shaw.
Sorry. I was just curious how many vape shops this will negatively impact, because I did see some red dots in some red zones where it was prohibited, so I just wanted to confirm the number.
May I just ask the question, just to clarify? It's my understanding that the red dots are existing vape shops? Okay,
Yes.
so if you agree with the grandfathering, then we will not negatively impact those vape shops that exist right now.
I understand.
Okay.
I just wanted to confirm just the number.
I think it's 10, you said.
And then my other quick question, or comment rather, I noticed in the ordinance we use the word citizen on page 474. Can we update that to residents?
I completely support that. We've been trying as a city to make sure we're saying resident, because we have responsibility to serve all residents.
Yeah, that would be fine.
Thank you. And was the number 10, just to clarify? Yes, number
Yes.
10. Okay. Are you okay with this ordinance as is, assuming the grandfather?
Yes.
And also adjusting to resident versus citizen? Okay, thank you. Councilmember Jackson, since we're going down the line.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will make this short, but thank you so much to staff. This has been a long journey, and it's not over yet, but we're getting close to it. And you guys have really done a yeoman's work in putting it together, dealing with our changes and our questions. And I think, the policy for the whole city is the way to go. And I do support the grandfathering. I think it's a good idea. And I think we should not take our eye off the ball, which is that we want to protect the kids and minors from being exposed to this. And I think does a good job of doing that, but while also making sure that these are legitimate businesses and they have a right to be in business and have customers. So I think there's a balancing act, but I think you guys have done a really good job of striking that balance.
Thank you. Councilmember Larry, do you want to go again? I think you made your point clear, but just want to offer you the opportunity.
No, I appreciate it. I just want to also note that from the beginning, I have, outside of the zoning aspect of this, pushed for either something to advocate for regarding enforcement or something internal to the city around enforcement, because I will continue saying till my breath ends that the problem is not the vape shops, the problem is the 7-Elevens that kids can go in and not get carded. And that is a challenge, and it's not as easy as a zoning overlay. And so I would still want to advocate for how are we doing enforcement? What are our challenges there, and what are the possible penalties that can come from municipality on top of other things? I'm sitting here going, I will, for the good of the order, move forward with this one, with the caveat that as a precedent, I understand that in some instances we may want to look at a citywide policy. However, when I don't hear citywide on something, I grow concerned. And so that would be my plea to anybody who's watching at 11:15, from any other part of the city who is concerned about this issue, to email us. I would love to hear that. And I would really hope moving forward, either legislatively, county advocacy, some combination of the above, to focus on the actual issue, which is enforcement.
Thank you. I have a quick follow-up question to that, and this came up during the last mayor and council. In addition to the underage aspect, which I think RCPD would be involved in, Rockville City Police Department, but in terms of like there are other things that are in county code about flavors and things of that sort, that is up to the county on enforcement, isn't that correct?
Yes.
But if the city of Rockville is aware of instances where it is not being followed, would we then coordinate with the county?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Just want to clarify. Councilmember Fulton?
Thank you for all your efforts on this. I would be supportive of, with the really important amendment that Councilmember Shaw said about residents waiving the layover period and passing as is. Really great work.
Thank you. Dr. Miles?
I associate myself with the comments of my colleague, Councilmember Fulton.
Thank you. So with that said, you have the edit that we would like to see, as well as, we're positive on the grandfather. I do think we need to introduce, do you want us to introduce at this time? Okay, all right. Councilman Van Grack.
I would hereby introduce the ordinance for TXT 2024-00265, a zoning text amendment to regulate tobacco and vape shops that appears in item 11E in our packet with the amendment as referenced prior and agreed to by majority of the council that would include the changing of the word citizens to residents, plural.
Thank you. So we have an introduction. Now we'll take a motion. Councilmember Fulton.
Getting good at this. I move to waive the layover period on the thing we just introduced.
Do we have a second? Dr. Miles.
Second.
I love how everyone's taking a turn. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Okay, it is unanimous. You want another motion, correct? All right. Councilmember Van Grack, or does someone else want to take a turn?
He's so good at it.
Okay, all right.
Madam Mayor, I hereby move for adoption the ordinance for TXT 2024-00265, a zoning text amendment to regulate tobacco and vape shops, which was amended per the introduction to change the word citizens to residents.
Councilmember Shaw, thank you. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. It is unanimous. Thank you very much. Excellent work on this. The maps were much clearer, and you even zoomed in on areas of the city. So thank you. Really nice work.
And I wanted to thank the city attorney's office and our research staff for doing the maps for us. It was definitely a team effort.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, that agenda item has concluded. We'll next be moving on to agenda item 12, mock and future agendas. I did send 2 questions on this one. One was just to ask about the budget amendment and got an answer. So, Mr. Mihaly, do you want to just reiterate what's coming up with budget amendment?
The budget amendment is really just reflecting on those amendments that we collect over a quarterly basis and putting them out to the commission for council for adoption.
All right. And the other piece is we are going to be approving a property that will have 0 MPDU affordability because it's just under the amount. And there are a lot of reasons for that, a long history. But I did mention to the city manager that we have been waiting for a 1-sentence, actually a two word change to the code and to change the trigger from 50 to 20, and that we should move forward with that. So ASAP. Is there anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, I did talk to the majority of the council about this item. Everybody was in concurrence about this. We just have to make sure we're in compliance with public hearing notice requirements. And as soon as I have a date, I'll add that to an email and send it all to you.
Thank you. Any other comments on future agendas? Okay. Thank you. We'll move to agenda item 13, old new business. I have a few items, but I'll hold in case anyone else has. Mine will be very quick. Councilmember Valeri, then Councilmember Van Graag.
So, and I wasn't quite sure where to bring this up necessarily. I could have done it during mock agenda, but piggybacking off of the public ethics code update, I do want to put in to ask to see if we can, as a body, agree to put on the future agenda a review of our public ethics code, with an eye toward looking at a code of conduct or standards such that we can not only maybe hold ourselves accountable to the public, but to each other as well. I think I mentioned previously, City of Gaithersburg has a really great example, so do some other jurisdictions. And whether we want this on the agenda, if we want to have it be part of another discussion, I just wanted to flag that. In addition to, we are still, I think, awaiting the election code review / update, if I'm not mistaken. I say this because I always spend way too much time in the code, but in particular in preparation for this evening. There's definitely some need to streamline things, and again, like you just noted as well. So, first and foremost, from a good governance perspective, I think we need to revisit the public ethics code, and would love to hear if my colleagues agreed with that.
I will say I am supportive of this. I will also want to hear from the City Attorney's Office. I know that there are several chapters to be updated, like the MPDU chapter. There are things that relate, I think it's chapter 13, chapter 18, and election code. So I'm supportive. I just want to make sure that we don't sidetrack the others.
I would think, but
Yeah.
before updating codes, making substantive updates, we would probably want to have work sessions. So I think that would be a better discussion with the city manager.
Thank
So
you.
because whatever's decided, we can obviously update the code, but there's more to it than just simply updating the code.
Absolutely. And I would assume also that there are things that staff may have that you're going to recommend and that we as council will also want to weigh in on.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite an undertaking, candidly, to really dig deeply into the ethics code. You know, that certainly would be a work session. We'd probably have some framing questions for you guys to give us some thoughts on it, but I'm still learning what other things are in the hopper. If this is another thing, it could just push other things down. So, but certainly if the council wants us to look into our ethics code, we'll schedule a work session for that.
Thank you. Councilmember Fulton.
Maybe I just wanted to ask a clarifying question. First of all, yes to whatever we can, all the various code things getting done, but if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. But I think I understand your underlying interest to be something that several of us have mentioned. I think actually Councilmember Dr. Miles too. Like, are you talking about like our own standards of conduct, like developing something in writing, whether it's a code of conduct and operating procedures for the elected? Mm-hmm. And is there a way for that to be something separate than the actual ethics code that gets to the goal faster?
If I may. Councilmember Valeri.
Yes, I am open to any other way, and then we could look to the future to have a broader work session. There is no urgency to this, what I'm talking about. I just have in front of me the list of like, oh, we were going to do that. Oh, we're going to do that. But as of right now, predominantly, and rightly so, much of our ethics language revolves around financial impropriety and those sort of issues, whereas there may be other issues. So I agree, Councilmember Fulton, it may take, something else similar to the way that we develop rules and procedures, something else that is a little less onerous than code, and I'm open to it as well.
Thank you. So that would be a first step of looking at a code of conduct for us. And I believe staff said that staff senior leadership is working on its own code of conduct and would try that first. If that was my
So Mayor,
recollection.
if I might
Absolutely.
suggest, I think feels like we're talking about multiple things. I mean, updating our ethics code is one thing, rules of procedure is another, your own code of conduct is another. So if it's okay, during my one-on-one meetings with you, I might flesh that out a little bit and then come up with recommendations on one or more discrete work sessions to attack this, if that's okay. Because right now, doing it on the fly, I'm not trying to get my arms wrapped around it.
Totally support that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and just because we want to give you space to dig in a bit more, we still need work sessions on housing, economic development, and public safety. So those are pieces.
More of a priority.
And those are strong priorities, like shorter term. In addition, we've talked about Chapter 13 and 18, as well as election code. So we've got a good list going here, and just want to make sure we can map those out versus just dump them all on, because we want to be effective and get through them. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Van Grack?
Just a question for the city manager, just asking for an update. I know you and I have had discussions, because I know this body has twice during the budget season talked about the police salaries and making them commensurate as soon as we get to August with the other police departments. I want to give us an update as to where that is, because it's now a couple days to August, and whether there needs to be any action more from the body, or whether everything is proceeding per our prior conduct that the mayor and council unanimously asked for.
Yeah, and I will just clarify, I think you need to come back to us. We wanted the review done and sent to us by August, but I know that budget amendment will be a separate discussion, correct? So if you could weigh in on that.
Yep, I'll weigh in on all of it. Councilmember Van Grack, thank you. So I've talked to a majority of the council members about potential salary adjustments to police. Heard that loud and clear. Just looking at that right now. I actually have a meeting scheduled with police, finance, and HR for this Friday, so it's very prominent to look at what that would entail. What I need to get my arms around is exactly what that number is, to see what capacity we have in our budget, and if we don't have capacity, then we need to do a budget amendment with it. But I've heard clear direction from the council on to move forward. I just don't have a schedule, but that's what I plan on finding out on Friday.
Thank you. And then at some point around the August timeframe, we'll get an understanding of what staff's recommendation is.
Correct.
Okay, just want to clarify. Does that answer your question?
But clarify, I mean, we're coming up on the August recess. So if you need the mayor and council to act in August, we've got a limited time. If there's just a recommendation and you can move forward without the mayor and council, then we're going to get, I just want to make sure we're not getting into September and October if you need further action.
I understand. What I don't have right now is a number of what that cost. I can't make a recommendation to until I know what the number is of the cost. But as soon as I get that, I'll let you guys know. But I hear clear direction from you to move as quickly as possible to make an adjustment to police salaries, and that's what I'll do.
Okay.
So we'll get information in August, and based on the timing, it sounds like we will have some sort of budget amendment early fall.
At the latest.
At the latest.
Wait, so I guess I'm hearing different things. Are you going to need the mayor and council to act, or can it be implemented? And if so, I mean, again, we had specifically said we wanted this to happen in August. I'm worried about this leaking into September, October, if there needs to be mayor and council action.
So let me get into a little bit more details. So I heard again from the council to look into salaries. We're waiting for comps on what are police officers paid in other competing jurisdictions. We're getting that information. Then I have to work with my team to make a recommendation on what would those salary increases be, what is that number, and then if or not I need to do a budget amendment and bring that forward too. There's a chance I can get all that done very quickly, but I can't give you a specific timeline yet until I know what that amount of money is. So there's just a couple more steps I need to get. But I hear clear direction from the council to move forward as quickly as I can, and I'll do that, and as soon as I have specific dates, I'll let you know.
To clarify, though, if there's a need for a budget amendment, that would need to come to mayor and council.
Correct.
Exactly. Right, and we'd have to vote on that in open session. It wouldn't be one-on-one meetings.
Correct.
Okay.
And if that can't happen on next Monday, then it has to happen after the recess.
Correct.
Okay, and I guess was some of the concerns I had, because that's now going to push us 2 months after the budget was implemented, that we're now without the salaries that we had aimed for.
Agreed, and all I can say right now is I'm picking up a discussion that you guys had before I got here, and I'm trying to move forward with it.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
Thank you very much. I had very, very quick items. One is, I sent an email about the zoning rewrite update. You don't have to respond now, but just would like to get an understanding if that's on track. It was supposed to be a quarterly update this summer, I believe. Rockville goes purple. I apologize I didn't give you a heads up on that sooner, but it is something that happens in the month of September, and we only have one more meeting, but if an update to mayor and council can be shared, because it usually comes around this time frame that we would be getting an update on the activities. And in the past, mayor and council has sat on discussions on that. We have a new MCPS superintendent. I'd like to see if we could work with Linda Moran or someone on your team to be able to write a welcome letter. There are times where we advocate with MCPS, and it would be nice to make sure we have a relationship with the superintendent, something on behalf of the entire body versus just the individual outreach that I may have done. I wanted to see if the body would approve. I cannot make a motion, as you noted, in terms of practice, but would you all be open to supporting a letter to MCPS new superintendent? Okay, will someone make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I heard Councilmember Valeri. Third, fourth. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say there are 3 new businesses open up in the square, and there are a couple others in the center. This is exciting for the city. We have to celebrate the good, right? So I wanted to see if we could work with Ready to put out something. I know that, encourage them to put out a notice celebrating, some of the growth, and then also work with Ready to help to support other businesses coming in on the Y Rockville Town Square. They're looking at a couple. We did the Welcome to Rockville, or the new business, piece where planning and Ready work together to produce as to why Rockville broadly. There may be other areas in the city that we think to do this, but in my experience in working with some potential businesses, they don't know all that's happening in and around town center. So something that speaks to, we're getting new housing, we're just something that helps us to encourage those businesses to get to yes, so that we continue this momentum, I think would be very helpful. I did mention this preliminarily at the Ready board meeting, and there was support, but I wanted to raise it among my colleagues and see if there would be support for city staff helping on something like that. Can we give direction? So, Councilmember Fulton.
I just don't understand what the "it" is. So
Oh,
we would be
it would be
directing
like
staff to encourage Ready to publicize the good things that are happening in.
And a sort of a town center, why town center one-pager? That businesses. The interesting thing about Rockville Town Square and Center is that there are multiple, the center, there are multiple businesses. And I've heard from, in some of my discussions with potential businesses coming through, they don't fully track all of our development review of what projects are coming in and where we are. To speak to, we're re-envisioning working with WMATA. We're building new housing. We have this town center plan that's being developed, but just something that Ready can have, and the business owners, as they're pitching new businesses, can have, that tells the complete picture. In a one-pager versus I don't know how long is the town center plan. I read it's extensive. So it's just a short blip. So
we're directing staff to ask Ready to do this, or we're directing staff to do this themselves?
To work with Ready to do it. Okay. It'll be a collaborative.
Like a city-based piece, not a Ready-based.
Yeah.
Yes.
And staff, there's a precedence for this with the broader Rockville pitch to businesses. Welcome to Rockville. So are you all supportive, not supportive? If not, we just need a motion to direct. Dr. Miles. All right. Do we have a second? Okay, Councilmember Valeri seconds. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Okay, all right. It's unanimous. Go ahead, Councilmember Valeri.
Unless you have one.
Go ahead.
Well, no, I'll wait for you. I'll go last.
I mentioned the workshops that we need. There was note about getting a housing workshop scheduled, so I just wanted to see if we can get a doodle poll or some proposed dates on that. And the last piece for me is just, we had a great discussion on ADUs, and just to see if, a year out, that we can just get an update on how we're doing with accessory and detached and unattached, attached ADUs, just so we can see the progress we're making. That's it for me. Councilmember Shaw.
Previously we talked about making our process with proclamations more effective.
Yes, we
And
did.
I wanted to revisit that to see when, if there's been an update on that. I know recently we've had less proclamations, but I just wanted to revisit that item.
Yes, we're working on that, and we'll be bringing it back as soon as we can get it on the schedule.
Thank you very much for raising that. That's a good one. And I do remember that the Human Rights Commission had some suggestions, so I know that as liaison, you may want to help that commission know how to use our system and process. Okay. Councilmember Valeri, did you have one more?
Yeah. So I guess this would technically fall under new business, but we have a council member, perhaps with the same letter of the last name as me, who we should all extend our congratulations to, as he is now an engaged, a soon-to-be attached dwelling unit, and just wanted to congratulate you. No motions needed on that. Pretty sure she said yes. So just congratulations, council member.
The unnamed council member thanks you.
Exactly. But I liked ending with good news too. Like, I'm just like Debbie Downer all the time, but I saw that news and had to talk about it in new business. So
The whole city knows now.
and now the city knows.
And so that means we're all
To all family members we've not informed, my apologies.
And that means we're all invited now, right? No, I'm joking.
We're just gonna crash.
All right. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Second. All right. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye.
Wait a minute, who did the first?
Councilmember Van Grack. Councilmember Valeri seconded.
V to V.
And everyone said yes.
Yes, we did.
Thank you, everyone. This has been a fantastic meeting. I appreciate all of you.